This story follows a man named Chong Yan, an underpaid engineer who collapses from the overwhelming stress of his workload. After dying, he awakens in a new world, reincarnated into the body of a prince. In this unfamiliar land, witches exist and possess supernatural abilities. Chong Yan, now inhabiting a royal identity, plans to combine his engineering knowledge with the powers of witches to advance this primitive society. His new life begins abruptly. A voice calls out for him to wake up. As he opens his eyes, he finds himself seated on a chair, stunned by his surroundings. Several women dressed in strange old-fashioned clothing stand around him. When he looks forward, he sees an entire town gathered before what appears to be an execution platform. Naturally, his mind reels. Moments earlier he had been crunching numbers, not presiding over executions. Suddenly, a bald man addresses him as Prince, and reminds him that the time for the execution has arrived. He must announce his judgment. Still lost, Chong Yan hesitates, but as he concentrates, the original memories of the body's true owner rush into his mind. He learns that he is now Roland Wimbledon, the fourth prince of Greycastle. His father, the king, has sent each of his children to rule separate territories, promising that in 5 years the one who governs best will inherit the throne. Unfortunately for Roland, his siblings possess remarkable talents that give them a significant edge. The first prince is an exceptional warrior. The second masters finance. The third princess commands a loyal following. The fifth princess is exceptionally intelligent. Meanwhile, Roland, long considered the most useless of the royal children, has been sent to a remote border town filled with filth, poverty, and neglect. Here he must somehow transform this miserable place into a thriving territory. As he grapples with the weight of this revelation, the old advisor reminds him again to issue his ruling. Only then does he realize that the accused criminal he is expected to execute is a witch. The crowd roars with anticipation, eager to watch the supposed devil spawn be put to death. Disgusted by their ignorance and barbaric behavior, he angrily swats the execution order out of the advisor's hands and commands them to release the witch immediately. The crowd falls into uneasy silence, clearly displeased with the prince's sudden change in judgment. Roland sighs in exhaustion and announces that the trial will be postponed. The old advisor tries to convince him otherwise, and Chief Knight Carter Lannis steps forward, urging the prince to reconsider. According to him, if they delay the execution, other witches might attempt a rescue. Roland cannot help but laugh at the idea of this muscular, battle-hardened knight being so terrified of witches. He casually strolls down from the platform, suggesting that if more witches did attack, they could simply eliminate them all at once. Carter, baffled, does not know how to respond. The scene shifts to Roland's residence in Border Town. Outside, the irritated knight stands stiffly while Roland firmly shuts the door in his face. Alone, Roland initially sighs in relief before suddenly panicking. He has never dealt with so many people before, at least not while alive. Yet he refuses to waste this second chance at life. Determined, he resolves to take Roland's role seriously and uncover the truth about the witch. The story then moves to the dungeon where she is being held. Despite the knight's frantic warnings about the dangers of facing a witch, Roland simply laughs at them, teasing Carter for being scared of a little girl. Carter insists witches are servants of the devil. Roland ignores him and continues forward until he finally stands before the girl labeled a witch. She rises to her feet, and Roland immediately flushes at her beauty. Carter, however, loudly steps in, urging the prince to keep his distance. Annoyed, Roland lightly smacks the knight on the helmet and tells him to stand back. He approaches the girl again and gently asks for her name. After some hesitation, she tells her story. Her father had been trapped during a mine collapse. In the chaos, a greedy miner tried to steal his belongings. She called neighbors for help, and her uncle confronted the thief. When the man nearly killed her uncle, she instinctively reached out, unleashing a power she never meant to use. The attacker was instantly reduced to ash. Horrified, the neighbors branded her a witch. Despite her pleas for secrecy, her father ultimately turned her in. Before she can finish, the advisor steps forward and urges Roland to execute her before she causes further harm. Roland waves him off. Intrigued, he wants to see this supposed witchcraft for himself. The girl is stunned. No one has ever asked her to display her powers before. But Roland, unbothered, encourages her to demonstrate what she can do. Anna calmly reminds the prince that her powers are sealed by the locket around her neck. She warns him that removing it might unleash uncontrollable chaos. Before she can finish, Roland reaches out, snaps the chain, and tosses the locket aside as if it weighs nothing. He tells her to stop stalling and show him her powers. The moment the locket hits the ground, flames begin to crackle around her. Fire gathers and swirls in a mesmerizing dance, illuminating the entire dungeon. Roland's eyes widen in awe as the cell fills with blazing light. When the heat reaches its peak, the iron bars melt effortlessly, and Anna steps through them like it's nothing. The knight, who had been trembling nearby, flees in the opposite direction. Roland, however, stands rooted to the spot, stunned by the sheer magnitude of her abilities. Only now does he understand why the advisor claimed that fire could not harm her. She is fire. As the flames dissipate, Roland's mind sparks with possibility. The engineer in him immediately recognizes the potential of such power. This kind of magic could change everything. Anna, however, bows her head and quietly instructs him to end her life, now that she has shown him the truth. Instead, Roland removes his coat and drapes it over her scorched clothing. He tells her she is hired. In his former world logic, she is nothing less than a perpetual motion machine, capable of generating fire seemingly without limit. Naturally, not everyone shares Roland's enthusiasm. The old advisor is horrified. He shouts a warning, insisting that employing such a dangerous witch could draw the wrath of the Witch Cooperation Association and possibly doom them all. Roland dismisses his panic, ordering him to prepare a work contract for Anna and to arrange proper living quarters. Later, at the administrative office, the advisor reports that the arrangements are complete, though he still questions sparing the witch. Roland cuts him off. To him, witches are not monsters. The advisor remains unconvinced, so Roland lays out the truth plainly. Border Town is in shambles. He lacks the wealth of his brothers and the talents of his sisters. If he wants even a chance to win the king's competition, he must think differently. He must rely on solutions no one else would dare to consider. Hearing his determination, the old man relents and agrees to prepare a formal meeting with Anna. Meanwhile, Anna is thoroughly washed, cleaned, and dressed in new clothing. When she arrives at the cottage Roland has arranged, the knight proudly presents the newly prepared home. Roland is impressed with the effort, especially on such short notice. When he turns and sees Anna in her maid's attire, clean, neat, and unexpectedly charming, he is pleasantly surprised. But instead of gratitude, Anna launches into a desperate rant. She demands to know why he is housing a murderer, why he is helping someone everyone else hates and fears. Roland calmly tells her he doesn't buy into the superstition surrounding witches. He believes people fear her only because they do not understand her abilities or their potential value to society. Extending his hand, he tells her he accepts her and promises to teach her how to use her power for good. Inside the cottage, Anna immediately begins practicing. Flames surge around her wildly, scorching whatever they touch. Roland quickly realizes that teaching her control will not be simple. Worse yet, every time she activates her abilities, her clothes burn away, leaving her mortified and forcing him to provide backup outfits. Thankfully, he prepared several in advance. Their training is interrupted when the old advisor bursts through the door, breathless and shaken. He brings alarming news. Patrols have discovered signs of demon activity, months earlier than expected. Roland, unfamiliar with the term, looks around in confusion while everyone else grows pale. The advisor explains that each winter, after the first snowfall and sunset, the gates of hell open within the Dragonspine Mountains. When that happens, demons pour into the land. Because Border Town is impossible to defend, everyone must evacuate to Longsong Fortress. He assures Roland that the prince's safety is their highest priority. Roland, curious, asks if the old man has ever seen these gates of hell. The advisor admits he has not. The mountains are impassable and emit a poisonous miasma that affects anyone who gets too close, unless they are already corrupted by demonic influence. Only witches can approach the mountains and see the gates for themselves. The prince then asks if the old man has ever seen a demon. Once again, the answer is no. This is his first time in the central region, and very few people ever survive encounters with actual demons. For the first time, Roland understands why this land's economy is stagnant, and why progress is slow. Every year, the entire region must uproot itself and flee. At the end of every year, Roland raises a sharp and logical point. If Longsong Fortress can withstand the demons, then demons are not invincible. With that in mind, he becomes eager to confront them himself. The old advisor is horrified by this idea, and explains why the fortress survives the annual onslaught. Longsong has massive walls and Duke Ryan's elite troops stationed within. Border Town, positioned along the North Slope Mountains, mainly serves as the early warning system for impending demonic threats. But Roland remains steadfast. He orders the advisor to gather any local soldiers who have real experience fighting demons. Later, under the shade of a gazebo, Roland and Anna snack together while discussing the threat of the months of demons. At Roland's request, Anna begins explaining the nightmare that commoners endure each year. Her voice grows solemn as she recounts the harsh reality. Her father, like many miners in town, barely survives season after season. When the months of demons begin, the people of Border Town send their yearly mining production to Longsong Fortress in exchange for next year's rations and a bit of gold. During this period, everyone hides inside the fortress until winter ends. But one year, the months of demons lasted for 4 relentless months. Longsong officials declared that the ore delivered from autumn could only pay for 3 months of food. The 4th month's supply had to wait for new ore. But since the demons did not retreat, the people were trapped inside. Provisions became scarce, and although food was distributed equally, the strong inevitably bullied the weak. Hearing this, Roland grows furious. He promises Anna that no one will ever suffer through such torment again. After leaving the gazebo, Roland asks to speak with his advisor to check on preparations. The story shifts to the border town administrative office, where Barov has gathered 3 individuals, 2 soldiers responsible for the annual patrol and beacon lighting, and a hunter who claims to have slain demons before. One soldier stutters nervously, producing incoherent sounds. Roland sighs and directs the other soldier to speak. The second explains that demons were once ordinary forest creatures, but exposure to hellish miasma turned them savage, difficult to kill, yes, but still mortal. Once the months of demons end, Longsong's cavalry sweeps the area to eliminate any lingering beasts. At that moment, the hunter slams his fist onto the floor, boasting loudly. He claims that demons are no harder to kill than slicing cucumbers, and that he has personally slain 2. The enormous man kneels before the prince. Barov introduces him as Iron Axe, rumored to carry monster blood from the Mojang clan, which supposedly explains his towering height. Roland asks if his claims are true. Iron Axe confidently confirms he has killed a demonic boar and a wolf-type demon. He then elaborates hunters classify demons into types. The common ones begin as normal animals, but become frenzied after exposure to hellish miasma. Wolf types are fast and stealthy, while boar types possess backs so thick that even crossbow bolts struggle to pierce them. Roland quickly recognizes that these demons are simply animals with enhanced traits. Iron Axe agrees, but warns that the true threat comes from hybrid demons, abominations forged by the depths of hell. He describes one such creature, a monstrous beast, with powerful legs for charging and enormous wings for short bursts of flight. Its senses were so acute, it could detect prey no matter how well hidden. Iron Axe survived only by diving into the Redwater River and losing consciousness. Roland realizes that walls can stop ground-based monsters, but flying hybrids present a different challenge. He turns to his knight and asks how common these hybrids are. The knight replies that during any months of demons, 2 or 3 hybrids typically appear, enough to give even Longsong Fortress serious trouble. With this understanding, Roland slams his hand onto the table and announces his decision: he will remain in Border Town for the winter. Everyone freezes in shock. The knight panics and insists that they are vastly outnumbered. Roland counters by proposing they build a wall from the foot of the North Slope Mountain to the Redwater River. The knight dismisses the idea immediately, arguing it would take a lifetime to construct such a wall. Roland leans back and tells him to relax. If he cannot complete the wall quickly, he will retreat with everyone else. He has no intention of dying here. The knight, finally calming down, pledges his loyalty, vowing to protect Roland at all costs. Meanwhile, at the bustling Greycastle port of Clearwater, the third princess appears. She comments on the cold ocean breeze signaling winter's approach, and turns to her knight, Ryan, asking about the return of their Black Sail fleet. Ryan assures the third princess that the Black Sail fleet should return to port within 3 days, assuming all goes smoothly. She notes that this is their final expedition of the year and hopes they bring back something worthwhile. As they walk through the palace, Ryan wonders how she prepared so quickly for the succession competition their father unexpectedly announced. She admits she never saw it coming, but believes the whole setup is merely paving the way for the king's favored son. Still, she laughs off the idea that competence alone guarantees the second prince's victory. She urges her knight to think deeper about why she launched the Black Sail fleet's ambitious expedition. After a moment of reflection, Ryan realizes the truth. The fleet isn't solely about acquiring wealth. It is a calculated move to gain influence and power. Through the Black Sail initiative, she has gathered skilled sailors, hardened fighters, and influential allies. This is Garcia Wimbledon, the third princess of Greycastle, clever, strategic, and determined to carve her path to the throne. She then asks for an update on their plot to assassinate the fourth prince. Ryan sighs, reporting that there has been no word from the border. It seems their poison plan failed, and the spies involved have disappeared. Garcia sneers, assuming her younger brother dealt with those spies as soon as he discovered their betrayal. Ironically, the poison did kill the real Roland Wimbledon. Chung Yan simply reincarnated into his body afterward, causing Garcia to believe her plan failed. She now intends to kill Roland once he flees to Longsong Fortress for winter, and she orders Ryan to wait patiently. She also scoffs that the poison seller NB lied about the poison being colorless and tasteless. As punishment for deceiving her, she casually instructs Ryan to hang him, despite the poison having worked exactly as promised. Her ruthlessness is immediate, cold, and absolute. The story then shifts to Anna. She sits peacefully among green fields with her former mentor Carl, who asks what she's reading, poetry perhaps, or church history. She smiles at him gently, but a dark memory flashes before his eyes. He sees a terrified crowd accusing his innocent student of being a witch, the reincarnation of the devil. He sees her hanging. The shock jolts him awake in his office. Gasping, he reflects on the tragedy. If a pure, kind-hearted girl like Anna could be labeled evil, then the greedy officials of Greycastle, who caused countless deaths by cutting costs with inferior stone, are the true demons. If they hadn't downgraded materials merely to save a few hundred gold coins, the theater would never have collapsed, and those innocent people would still be alive. Yet none of those corrupt administrators were punished. Instead, the blame fell on innocent stonemasons. Taxes skyrocketed, inequality grew, and unjust laws branded curious, gifted girls as devils, sending them to the gallows. He prays to God to condemn the ones who truly deserve such punishment. A knock interrupts his grief. He opens the door to find one of his young students, Nana, trembling with fear. She anxiously asks if she too will be hanged like Anna. Carl immediately comforts her, patting her head and promising to protect her at all costs. As he walks through town, his mind churns. He has spent years watching the powerful oppress the innocent. This time he refuses to stand idle. He will not allow another girl to meet Anna's fate. Then he notices a crowd gathering at the quest board. A new notice has been posted, signed and stamped by the fourth prince. It calls for laborers to construct something in the border region. Gravel workers, stonemasons, builders. Carl's eyes widen as he reads the clear, detailed announcement. He remembers the rumors about this prince. Strange, unorthodox ideas, and a personality completely unlike the other royals. Moreover, the prince supposedly dislikes the church's rigid influence, something that fills Carl with cautious hope. But supporting Anna may risk his own life. If the prince sides with the church, Carl will be executed as a sympathizer. His only hope lies in the possibility that Roland rejects the church's oppressive laws. The story returns to Roland. His knight is questioning him about the dimensions of the massive wall he plans to build. Roland explains that the wall will stand 15 feet tall and 6 feet wide, spacious enough for 4 people to stand side by side on top. His knight adds that they will need a trench as deep as a man's height to stabilize a structure of that scale. With a 15-foot height and a 6-foot top width, the base will need to be double that to ensure proper stability. Even with 350 craftsmen working non-stop on digging and construction, the knight estimates they could only finish before next year's months of demons. Roland asks what exactly causes such a delay. The knight explains that the real challenge is laying the stones. Each rock must be carefully chosen, shaped, and polished, so the pieces lock together securely. If not fitted properly, the entire wall could collapse under pressure. Roland approves the plan to dig the trench and build the foundation simultaneously. As for the stonework, he reassures his knight that he has a solution. Greycastle's alchemy workshop recently developed something called cement. The knight's eyes widen. He has never heard of such a thing. The scene shifts to the cement kiln cottage in Border Town. Roland explains that making cement is simple since the raw materials are abundant, but the challenge lies in achieving the correct calcination temperature. He admits he cannot recall the exact temperature required, and with no instruments in this world, precision is nearly impossible. Just then, the cottage door swings open, revealing Anna. Before stepping inside, Roland instructs his knight to wait outside. It is clear he has been relying on Anna's fire magic to achieve the high temperatures needed for cement. She is the perfect human furnace. Roland hands her his coat again before she emerges, once more having incinerated her clothes while working. Anna excitedly announces that she completed the task he requested. Inside, a fresh heap of cement lies on the floor. Roland examines it closely, pleased that their experiment succeeded. He decides to run tests before producing it on a larger scale. Anna asks where he plans to use the cement. Roland explains its broad applications: homes, bridges, roads, structures that can withstand rain, heat, and snow, far better than fragile wooden or mud brick houses. He credits Anna entirely, acknowledging that none of this would be possible without her. Outside, they glue several stone blocks together using the cement. Both Anna and the knight are astonished by how quickly it hardens and how strong it becomes. The knight tries prying the stones apart with all his strength but fails to move them even an inch. Roland reminds him that he underestimated the material. Cement, he says, is far stronger and more reliable than compacted dirt or clay. The knight marvels at this wonder sticky mud that becomes solid rock. Confident, the knight declares that with this invention, they could cover the entire border with walls in 5 years. Roland immediately waves the idea away. Even the tallest walls cannot protect them from enemies within. Their first battle, he says, is against nature itself. They must build homes that will not collapse and leave people homeless. And he vows to prove to the world that witches are humanity's most valuable asset. The next day, cement production begins in full. Workers who responded to Roland's recruitment notice gather raw materials and labor non-stop, giving Anna some rest. Meanwhile, Roland begins excavation for the city wall's foundation between the North Slope Mountain and the Redwater River. But progress is disappointing. When the knight proudly notes Roland's visit to the construction site, Roland sheepishly admits the truth. After all their effort, they have only managed to scrape out a crude ditch, nowhere near the sturdy foundation needed for a major city wall. Back on Earth, Roland used to geek out over mechanical blueprints with his civil engineer friend. Together they made an impressive duo of engineering nerds. But here, without modern tools or expertise, he quickly realizes civil engineering is not something he can bluff his way through. He desperately wishes he had a real stonemason or construction professional to consult. As if on cue, the advisor arrives with news. A stonemason has responded to their notice. Even more surprising, the man claims to have been a member of the famed Greycastle Mason Guild. Roland immediately recognizes the name, one of the country's most respected guilds before it was disbanded following a construction accident. Shrugging off the guild's tragic past, Roland argues that every profession carries risk. What matters now is talent. Excited, he orders the advisor to bring the stonemason to him at once. The story shifts to Roland's administrative office in Bordertown. Roland lounges casually at his desk, while Anna sits nearby, absorbed in a book. At last, the knight arrives with the stonemason Roland has been eager to meet, only for Roland to discover that the man is none other than the teacher who had been worrying earlier about his little witches. Before the teacher can begin any formal greetings, Roland waves off the courtesy and tells him to relax. But when the teacher notices Anna, he freezes, utterly shocked. His mind races, while Roland and the knight stare just as perplexed. Sensing danger or at least misunderstanding, Roland quickly orders the knight to block the door. The knight obeys immediately, planting himself at the entrance as if preparing to restrain a threat. But instead of attacking, the teacher collapses to his knees and begs Anna to forgive him for being unable to protect her when she needed him most. Realizing he is no danger to her, Roland relaxes. Anna, too, immediately recognizes her former teacher. Roland instructs the man to stand and explain himself. The teacher introduces himself as Carl Van Bate, a former member of the Greycastle Mason Guild who later became a teacher in Bordertown. He reveals that Anna was once his student. He then nervously comments that he doesn't understand why the prince spared Anna's life. Perhaps, he suggests, Roland wanted her as a concubine, but even that would be better than her being executed. Roland and Anna both stare at him, baffled by the absurd assumption. Carl becomes relieved when he realizes Roland does not believe in the church's claims about witches being devils incarnate. He then mentions that another gifted girl, Nana, has also awakened powers and needs protection. Roland immediately agrees to shelter her if necessary, though he notes he cannot take a child from her family unless she is in real danger. Inwardly, he is thrilled by the possibility of meeting another witch. Outwardly, he remains calm and composed. He explains clearly that he did not spare Anna out of sentimentality. He needs her help. He believes witch abilities are valuable tools, not curses, and as long as a witch commits no crime, he sees no reason to punish her. With that cleared up, Roland gets down to business. He asks Carl whether he has ever worked on construction in Greycastle. Carl nods enthusiastically and confirms he has extensive experience. Roland lays out his plan to construct a massive wall from the foot of North Slope Mountain to the Redwater River, an enormous project designed to keep demons out during the months of demons. From today onward, Carl will lead the entire construction effort. The scene shifts to Roland's palace gardens, where Nana arrives to meet him. She appears nervous at first, asking timidly if he is really Prince Roland Wimbledon. He smiles and confirms it. Nana brightens immediately and introduces herself as Nana Pine. Without hesitation, Nana races over to Anna and begins chatting and playing with her as though they were long-lost sisters. Roland watches them, amazed. These girls are so young yet so talented, he cannot help but wonder what the future holds for them. He turns to Nana and reminds her that Carl mentioned she recently awakened as a witch. Nana anxiously asks if he plans to execute her. Roland quickly reassures her criminals face the gallows, not innocent children. But Nana insists she must be possessed by a devil. Carl said so, and she believes it too. Anna gently pats her head while Roland asks when her powers first appeared. Nana explains that a week ago she found an injured bird. She wanted to help it, and suddenly images of water spheres appeared in her mind. Moments later, glowing orbs surrounded the bird, and its broken leg healed instantly. Hearing this, Roland sends the knight to fetch a chicken. While waiting, he muses that her ability may be connected to healing, a rare and invaluable power. He tells Nana that if she saved that bird, it proves she is a good person. Nana agrees, saying Carl explained that ordinary people fear witches simply because they cannot understand them. She insists she has never met a devil and is not influenced by one. Roland believes her immediately. He pats her head and explains that the church, and even Carl, were fooled by lies. When she asks why anyone would lie, Roland explains that it has nothing to do with morality. People spread falsehoods simply to make money. When the knight returns with the chicken, Nana hesitantly asks Roland to go easy on the bird. He agrees, then tells the knight to hold it firmly. With one swift motion, Roland gives the chicken a quick strike on the head. The poor creature squawks and collapses. Roland turns to Nana. Now is the moment of truth. He urges her to heal it quickly. Nana nods, determined to try her best. Nana gently places her hand on the wounded chicken. Immediately, those watery healing spheres appear around it. She concentrates hard, doing everything she can. Hours pass. Despite Roland's rough test, which leaves the chicken barely clinging to life, he finally understands the nature of Nana's power. She can heal injuries, mend fractures, and repair damaged tissue, but she cannot revive the dead. Once the demonstration is complete, Roland calmly instructs the knight to take the exhausted chicken to the kitchen. Nana, however, bursts into tears, Upset by how harsh Roland had been with the poor bird, he reassures her that it was necessary to understand her magic. Before long, a feast is laid out. Nana forgets her grievances the moment she sees the cooked chicken on the table, staring at it with sparkling eyes. After filling her belly, Nana waves goodbye cheerfully, and Roland waves back. Anna then asks why Nana isn't staying in the palace like she is. Roland explains that Nana still lives with her family, and they remain unaware of her abilities, but Anna fears it is only a matter of time before they find out and exile her just as she herself was condemned. Roland agrees that the risk exists, but reassures her until that day comes. Nana should cherish the time she has with her family. He then asks Anna if she misses her father. She quietly shakes her head. Roland understands her loneliness and promises that Nana will visit daily to practice magic together, so Anna won't feel isolated. He vows to give both girls as normal a life as possible, and he truly means it. Meanwhile, Roland's days become almost boring now that Carl Van Bate has taken over the construction project. Roland spends his afternoons hosting tea time sessions, while teaching Anna and Nana how to control their magic. Every so often he checks on the progress at North Slope Mountain, and is consistently impressed by how smoothly things are going under Carl's guidance. But then Barov arrives with troubling news. Hiring so many craftsmen and laborers is draining Roland's coffers far faster than expected. At this rate, Barov warns they may run out of money before spring. Roland panics internally. He is completely broke and has no idea how to fund the massive project any further. As Roland frantically brainstorms solutions, Barov studies him with unease. The prince has changed drastically, almost unnervingly so. The old Roland knew only luxury and indulgence. Barov had only stayed by his side because the king promised him the position of Minister of Finance after the succession struggle. Originally, Roland had no intention of running Bordertown, much less competing for the throne. He dumped every responsibility onto Barov and spent his days reveling in pleasure. But ever since he saved Anna, everything has changed. Roland now handles affairs with maturity and foresight, speaking in a cool, composed tone that makes Barov question whether the prince might have been possessed by a devil. But Barov dismisses the thought. After all, no devil-possessed man would casually handle a cursed retribution locket with his bare hands. The story shifts back to Bordertown's port, where two nobles and a red-haired ambassador are chatting. One noble complains that it's been a whole year since they last visited, and the town is still a lifeless pile of rocks. The redhead corrects him. It's only been 6 months. He adds that Duke Ryan sends different envoys each season. Last time he came, the place was full of exotic furs floating around, though he suspiciously chooses not to elaborate. Instead, he speaks optimistically about Bordertown's potential. With the right investments and defenses, the land between Bordertown and Longsong Fortress could be incredibly profitable. Suddenly, one noble panics when he discovers the ore stockpile is empty. Bordertown was supposed to prepare ore today for shipment before the demon season. These visitors came to collect it, in exchange for providing shelter at Longsong Fortress. Now, something has gone wrong. The ambassador sighs and insists they take the issue directly to Roland. Riding toward the castle, the purple-haired noble wonders if Bordertown has found a new trading partner, perhaps Willowtown or Fallen Dragon Ridge. He suspects Roland is behind the shortage. The redhead, thinking deeply, fears Roland may have already formed alliances downriver along the Redwater. If so, their old monopoly tricks won't work anymore, and they might lose significant profits. When they arrive at the castle, they are greeted not with chaos or excuses, but with an extravagant feast. The ambassador awkwardly picks up chopsticks, glances at Roland for guidance, and attempts to imitate him, but he can barely pinch anything. His food slips repeatedly and falls back onto the plate, drawing embarrassment and muffled laughter. Roland casually comments that chopsticks are easier and cheaper to make than forks. Once he introduces them to Bordertown, no one will have to worry about getting sick from eating with unwashed hands. As the sun begins to set and a warm golden glow fills the castle hall, Roland is just about to enjoy dessert when the ambassador finally brings up the purpose of their visit. They came to collect the usual ore shipment, only to find the dockyard empty. Roland drops the news without ceremony. A landslide recently hit North Slope Mountain. The miners have been clearing rubble for days, but there's no chance the mine will reopen until next year. When the ambassador asks about the ore production from previous months, Roland shrugs. It was barely enough to feed their own people. Even if they scrape together what little they have, the quantity would only buy 2 months of wheat. So Roland proposes changing the deal entirely. The ambassador stiffens. Sensing the prince slipping away, he apologizes for past mismanagement and offers a new proposal. The 6 noble families of Longsong Fortress can pool resources to lend Bordertown enough food for 1 month. They will repay it next year. Roland turns him down instantly. If they sell their ore to Willowtown, they won't owe anyone anything, and Willowtown is offering payment in Gold Dragon coins. Not only that, they are willing to trade wheat, cheese, bread, and honey, all at fair, transparent prices. Anything you can buy with gold, they will sell. Compared to Longsong Fortress's old exploitative system, this new arrangement is far more appealing. Roland then questions whether the ambassador even has the authority to renegotiate food loans on behalf of the 6 noble families. With one glance at his emblem, Roland identifies him as a member of the Honeysuckle family. He acknowledges that the ambassador has some influence, but asks if he can truly sway Duke Ryan and the other families. The ambassador's expression sours. Roland has hit the mark. A flashback reveals why the young man looks so troubled. Earlier, the ambassador tried to warn his father that the 4th prince was unlikely to accept their outdated trade deal. They should purchase ore at 30% below market price, still profitable but not brazen robbery. His father, however, brushed him off arrogantly, insisting that the lazy hedonistic 4th prince would never involve himself in trade matters. They could keep swindling Border Town with cheap bread and temporary shelter. Back in the present, the ambassador finally admits Roland has a point. He couldn't even convince his own father, so how can he speak for all 6 families? Still, he tries one last desperate move. He offers to buy Border Town's ore and gemstones at 30% below market price, claiming his offer must surely beat Willow Town's. After all, Willow Town is far away, and seeking shelter there during the demon season would be dangerous. But mid-sentence, he slips. He starts describing how hazardous the route to Willow Town is, bandits, beasts, broken roads, and then suddenly realizes he has practically threatened a prince. Panic flashes across his face. Roland simply chuckles. He explains that he never planned to take shelter in Willow Town at all. The ambassador freezes. Roland then drops the real bombshell. He isn't going anywhere. Not to Longsong Fortress, not to Willow Town, nowhere. Border Town will stand its ground. Roland declares Border Town will no longer be treated as a disposable outpost. It will become a true fortified part of the Grey Castle Kingdom, and soon it will boast a massive defensive wall stretching from North Slope Mountain to the Redwater River. The ambassador's jaw hits the floor. He asks if he heard correctly. Roland confirms it. They are building the wall right here, right now. The ambassador recalls a noble banquet months ago where everyone roasted the 4th prince for foolishly launching construction projects right before the demon months. They treated it as spoiled nobles teasing a hopeless prince with no sense of timing. He now realizes Roland was serious, dead serious. What shocks him even more is how drastically the prince has changed. The 4th prince, once known only for chasing pleasure, avoiding responsibility, and failing every task laid before him, is suddenly overseeing construction, reforming trade, rescuing witches, challenging long-standing systems, and discussing fortifications like a seasoned ruler. Something is happening in Border Town, something big, and the entire kingdom is about to feel its impact. The ambassador, visibly shaken by the scale of Roland's plans, promises that once he returns to Longsong Fortress, he'll try to convince the 6 noble families to cooperate. He hopes desperately that things somehow swing in Roland's favor. That night, Roland feels the downside of living in a frontier town. Nightlife here is non-existent. People go to bed early unless they're busy with certain intimate recreational activities. Though Roland could easily summon company to ease his boredom, he refuses. He does have morals after all. Suddenly someone appears behind him. He whirls around to find a robed woman praising his clever handling of the ambassador. She hints that Prince Roland may not be the hedonistic fool everyone assumes. Before he can bask in the compliment, she drops the bomb. She is an assassin. Roland reacts instantly, attempting to bolt out of the room, but a dagger flies past him and pins his escape route shut. The woman calmly tells him to relax. She only wants to talk. Freezing in place, Roland asks her who she is. She tells him she has no real name but is known as Nightingale, a title given to her by her sisters. She thanks him sincerely for treating witches kindly. As Roland studies her more carefully, he notices an emblem identical to the one Burrove showed him, marked with the insignia of the Witch Cooperation Association. Nightingale praises his sharp eyes again. Roland asks if she came for Anna. Although he has no idea how she learned about Anna, he assures her the girl is alive and well. Nightingale replies that she already knows and adds that even if Anna had been executed, the Witch Association would never retaliate by assassinating a prince. They refuse to get entangled in politics. Still, she warns him not to underestimate them. Roland repeats that Anna is thriving under his protection. Nightingale casually adds that she's also aware of Mana. Then she leans in and tells him she has been spying on him for 2 weeks straight, watching everything he does. Roland's stomach drops. He had absolutely zero idea he was being observed. She gestures for him to come closer, assuring him she will not harm him. Hesitantly, Roland sits. She moves uncomfortably close, noting with curiosity that he has no fear, not of her, not of witches at all. She leans even closer, and Roland recoils, half joking that she should keep things PG unless they want YouTube slapping age restrictions on their lives. Fortunately, she withdraws. Then she gets to the point. She steps here to take Anna and Nana. Roland refuses instantly. He insists they are happy and safe here. Nightingale argues that they would be safer under the protection of the Witch Association. where every witch is treated like family, Roland counters that the association doesn't even have a permanent home. His soldiers found traces of one of their camps in the forest last month, its tracks leading north into barren mountains. Living there would mean no food, no shelter, no resources. Nightingale insists they live in desolate mountains to avoid persecution. Roland shakes his head. Without supplies or stable shelter, life would be far harder for the girls. He also recalls Barov explaining the association's true goal: to unite all witches and eventually find the legendary Holy Mountain, where witches can live safely. He asks Nightingale if she holds this same goal. She replies cryptically that she cannot answer. Roland grows irritated. He states firmly that he will not allow Anna or Nana to live in barren lands ravaged by demons, lands unfit for human life. Then an idea hits him. He proposes that the entire witch association come to Bordertown for the winter. He beams with pride, thinking himself brilliant. They can wait out the months of demons together, safely behind the walls he is building. Nightingale is stunned. She reminds him that while he may not fear witches, the townspeople definitely will, and the church will descend like vultures if they learn witches are living openly under his protection. But Roland refuses to back down. He wants the world to see that witches aren't evil, especially if they are helping Bordertown survive the demon season. Nightingale then reveals the real reason she wants to take Anna. The girl is approaching coming of age. Roland is confused until she clarifies. Most witches awaken their powers near the months of demons. When the gates of hell supposedly open, coming of age marks a witch's final transition. If a girl has not awakened by 18, she never will. But for those who have awakened, the months of demons trigger a violent reaction. During this period, demons influence a witch's mind. The pain is indescribable, like something inside them is clawing out, trying to tear through their bodies. Every vein strains, every muscle burns. If they survive, they recover in 4 or 5 days. Those who don't die horribly. People believe witches are devil spawn because their agonizing deaths during maturity, combined with church propaganda, make it look as though demons possess them. Roland, still trying to make sense of all this, asks what happens after witches reach adulthood. Nightingale explains that once they survive their coming-of-age ordeal, their powers stabilize and often grow stronger. Some even gain entirely new abilities. Roland then questions the truth of the old records claiming witches can find eternal peace on the Holy Mountain, safe from demonic influence. Nightingale admits the Holy Mountain is little more than myth, mentioned only in cryptic texts. Taking Anna to headquarters might slightly improve her odds, but as long as witches are hunted and forced to hide, demonic attacks during maturity remain severe. Roland realizes something crucial. Anna and Nana are essential to his long-term plans, but if keeping them here puts them in danger, those plans mean nothing. After a moment of thought, he agrees to let Nightingale take Anna, if Anna herself wants to go. As for Nana, he'll speak with her the next day. Nightingale is delighted by Roland's apparent wisdom, but when Anna is summoned and asked for her decision, she rejects the offer immediately. The adults freeze in shock. Nightingale tries to reason with her. She tells Anna she can already sense the demonic energy stirring inside her, a sign maturity is close. She reminds Anna about the puberty talk Roland awkwardly gave her earlier. Anna, however, stands firm. She reminds Roland of his promise to give her an ordinary life. But that's not what matters most. She wants to stay by his side. She insists she'll survive her maturity and conquer it. Demonic energy won't stop her. Nightingale sighs. She gives up trying to persuade the stubborn girl but announces she will stay nearby and watch over Anna throughout the winter. She thinks Anna is too naive to understand the deadly risks ahead. Roland doesn't love the idea of being watched all season, but he doesn't argue. Before leaving, Nightingale faces Anna directly. She speaks of the hardships she has endured, the friends she lost, and her vow not to let Anna share their fate. With those words, she vanishes, literally fades out of existence. Roland is stunned. Her assassination skills are beyond anything he imagined. Once alone, Roland gently pats Anna's head and tells her it's late, time for bed. The next day, Roland addresses the people. Morning comes, and Roland greets the townsfolk with surprising cheer. He gathers everyone for a critical announcement. He explains that 4 days ago the ambassador from Longsong Fortress arrived to collect the usual ore shipment, but as everyone knows, the northern quarry collapsed a month earlier, halting production. The crowd grows fearful. Their last output was half the usual amount, and they still remember the starvation and suffering that followed. Roland then exposes Longsong Fortress's hypocrisy. He tried to negotiate for supplies, but the ambassador rejected him outright, just like 2 years ago. People panic again, recalling the families lost to hunger, the children buried, the grief they were forced to swallow. Roland asks how long they intend to endure this misery. The crowd begs him to save them. Roland nods solemnly and promises he will never let them fall into that pit again. After a dramatic pause, he drops a bombshell. 2 months of ore should have been enough to buy nearly a year's worth of food, but Longsong has been cheating them all along. Outrage explodes through the crowd. Their resentment toward Longsong Fortress boils over. Roland raises his hand and continues. Instead of repeating the same unfair deal, he traded their minerals to Willowtown and secured enough food to feed everyone through the winter. Cheers erupt, but Roland quiets them. There steps a catch. Cutting ties with Longsong means no evacuation. They must stay in Border Town during the months of demons. Fear spreads again. But Roland cuts through it with conviction. He reminds them of the wall they are building. Demons, he says, are no worse than forest beasts. They cannot scale a properly built wall. Then he gives them a choice. Seek refuge in Longsong Fortress and starve, or stay in Border Town and fight to protect their families. He asks who will stand with him on the wall. He promises fair silver wages for all defenders, and if someone falls, he pledges 5 gold coins to their family. The crowd erupts with determination. One by one, then all at once, they shout their resolve, ready to defend their homes. Meanwhile, in Longsong Fortress, laughter echoes throughout the castle halls. Nobles mock Roland's decision to stay in Border Town and build a wall. To them, the fourth prince is still a joke, an incompetent fool playing ruler in a backwater town. But they have no idea how wrong they are. The nobles in Longsong Fortress continue mocking Roland. One man with a thick mustache jokes that Roland will probably just stack rocks together, smear some dirt, and call it a wall. Eventually, he says, the foolish prince will beg Longsong for help, and when he does, they can squeeze him for everything he has. But the committee leader isn't as dismissive. He turns to the ambassador for a proper report. The red-haired ambassador, still rattled by Roland's unexpected competence, explains their original plan: maintain the monopoly as always, buy Border Town's ore at a price 3 times lower than market value, easy profit. But Roland ruined this simple setup with a completely different strategy. Instead of selling exclusively to Longsong, Roland plans to sell to multiple buyers. He's even willing to cut ore prices by half to stimulate demand, drive production, and grow Border Town's long-term revenue. And while lowering prices reduces immediate gains, Longsong would still earn far more over time by tapping into a thriving border economy. On top of that, Roland aims to mass-produce iron tools, items that would sell anywhere. It's an entirely new industry, and a lucrative one. And there's more. If Roland successfully holds off demons at Border Town, Longsong Fortress won't need to deal with annual monster cleanup, and when the 5-year throne competition ends, Longsong could easily inherit the kingdom's 3rd largest territory if they help Roland develop it now. The ambassador suggests they support Roland's wall project. Help now, profit massively later. The white-haired elder snorts at the idea. To him, this isn't about economics. He doesn't want to share any power or territory with a prince, especially not the 4th one. The steam engine reveal. The next day, the knight's jaw nearly hits the floor when he sees Roland's latest invention. Roland proudly credits Anna, who helped him weld the metal pieces. It sets a steam engine. Roland hugs the machine like it's his firstborn child. To him, it's the spark that will ignite an industrial revolution. Anna fires the furnace beneath it. The knight watches wide-eyed as the gears begin to turn. Slowly at first, then faster and faster. The mechanical wheel spins with growing force. The knight is astonished. This is the natural power Roland described. Strength equal to 10 trained knights. And unlike knights, this machine doesn't set get tired, doesn't sit need food, doesn't set care about weather, and can set be hurt by blades or arrows. Training a knight takes 15 years. Building this contraption took 3 days. For the first time, the knight wonders if knights themselves may become obsolete. Roland, meanwhile, is thrilled. His farming and manufacturing capabilities just jumped forward by centuries. Nightingale returns and takes the blueprints. Later that night, Roland opens his bedroom door and finds Nightingale once again, this time casually reading through his private blueprints. He scolds her for sneaking into his room, but she just laughs. She says the 4th prince was rumored to be useless with a horrible temper, yet the inventions in his notebooks are on a master craftsman's level. She asks if the blueprints are for the machine he unveiled today. Roland, disheartened by her rummaging through his secret plans, credits Anna again, explaining the machine could handle heavy labor and production tasks. Nightingale smiles. She announces she'll be taking the blueprints back to the Witch Association. Many witches could use the fire-based tech. Before Roland can object, she tucks them inside her robe. Roland's eyes accidentally dip downward. He panics and stutters in embarrassment. Nightingale smirks. "You'll get payment," she says, pulling a letter from inside her clothing and tossing it to him. Roland tears it open eagerly, only to find a message meant for his servant, Tib. The letter commands T not to fail a second time, and orders him to assassinate Prince Roland during the months of demons. Roland's mind spins. He remembers the old Roland's cruelty toward Tai, exploiting her whenever possible. The memories unsettle him deeply. Nightingale explains she intercepted the letter from a pigeon. There's no signature, but she suspects one of his siblings sent it. She asks whether she has his permission to investigate further. Roland gives her a firm yes. With a respectful gesture, she accepts the order, and declares she'll be taking the blueprints as payment. She vanishes moments later, leaving Roland staring at the empty air, aware that his life is now entangled in a much larger conflict than he ever imagined. The next day, he was still hung up on last night's letter when the knight arrived. The boy immediately dropped to his knees and confessed that TA had kicked the bucket during the night. Apparently, she had taken a tumble from her balcony. There were no signs of a struggle, and the guards swore they never saw anyone come or go. Visibly upset, the boy told the knight to have the head servant take care of the situation. Once the knight left the room, our hero called the assassin woman back, and she appeared right on cue. She quickly revealed that the servant had killed herself the moment she laid eyes on her. The boy couldn't hide his disappointment, muttering that he expected her to handle such things better. The woman countered that she had restrained T with ropes, but the servant had hidden poison inside a fake tooth. Once the poison took effect, the assassin threw the servant from the balcony to make it look like an accident. Even though the interrogation had reached a dead end, she pulled out another note she had found in Ty's apartment. With a sly grin, she pointed out that the sender called Ty Big Sister and mentioned a seaside view repeatedly. She hinted that there was a strong chance the third princess from Clearwater Port might be involved. She suspected that Princess Garcia Wimbledon could be holding Ty's family hostage, using her as a pawn to eliminate our hero. Judging by how Ty had chosen to end things, it seemed she had been trained for years before being assigned here. The boy felt deeply disappointed that his own siblings were so quick to eliminate each other for the crown. Suddenly the woman leaned close to his ear and whispered that she had to go because someone was approaching. He blushed slightly, perhaps catching a glimpse of her shirt straining before she vanished into thin air. Just then, the old consul arrived with good news. A number of people had volunteered to face the demons during the demon months. This put a broad smile on the prince's face, and he decided to see them for himself. Before he could leave, the old man genuinely asked whether he truly intended to send regular townsfolk to fight demons. Outside, the hero's mood sank further. The consul's concerns were absolutely valid. These people didn't look like fighters at all. They resembled street thugs at best. The knight, however, was thrilled, insisting he had gathered them according to the prince's wishes. But looking at their frail bodies, it was clear the knight had completely missed the point. The prince face-palmed, realizing he had expected too much from people who were barely surviving as it was. Even the consultant suggested they look for other recruits instead of relying on commoners. But the hero was determined to use them anyway. He believed he had already cracked the code. Building a strong army depended on people power, whether they held medieval swords or modern weapons. The knight suggested starting sword training the next day, but the hero waved him off. He told the knight to group the volunteers, then hit the jogging trail. He also requested that the Iron Axe hunter be brought along. The prince assured him to sit back and enjoy the show. By noon, the hunter had joined the cause, though the knight was unimpressed by the new training methods. Coming from a proud warrior family, he found it ridiculous that these recruits were being rewarded with eggs simply for standing around all morning. Eggs were expensive after all. But once again, the hero told him to relax. He knew that building a top-notch army could not be done in a few medieval months, and he wasn't trying to create muscle-bound fighters. All he wanted were disciplined soldiers who could deliver results quickly. He was using military techniques he had learned in college, methods that united people fast. He believed these villagers would adapt just as well. Before long, carriages arrived and everyone lined up eagerly for their eggs. Many still didn't understand why eggs were being given out as rewards. The knight banged his plate loudly to get their attention and ordered everyone to form 4 lines. Food would be distributed in order, and stragglers would have to wait. Nervous but compliant, the crowd lined up. The knight still couldn't understand why the prince bothered teaching such basic discipline. Suddenly murmurs rippled through the crowd as they chanted the name Iron Axe, who evidently had quite the reputation. The prince announced a break after lunch, followed by a trip to the town guard barracks. Iron Axe was appointed as their captain, tasked with teaching them how to pitch tents. As soon as the hero finished speaking, the crowd buzzed with disbelief over someone like Iron Axe being placed in command. To calm them, the prince reminded everyone that Iron Axe was not a local, just like the witches who didn't belong to Greycastle. In Border Town, everyone was treated equally. As long as they were not criminals, they were welcome. Then the prince unrolled a sheet of rules so long it could rival a year's worth of grocery lists. He told the chief knight to focus more on these rules than on who became captain. Everyone needed to memorize and follow them if they wanted their daily egg. The chief knight scratched his head, wondering how visiting teacher Carl was supposed to help with any of this. After dinner, the knight wondered aloud how reading and writing could possibly help in fighting demons. The prince brushed off his concerns, insisting that a well-educated army was always more effective, and that history had proven this many times. Next, we arrive at City Hall in Border Town. Our hero staggered out of his room, still half asleep, When Nightingale suddenly appeared out of nowhere, she teased him about his newfound habit of sleeping so much lately, and it seemed she had also helped herself to his breakfast. The boy was not exactly thrilled to see her eating his food and waltzing into his room uninvited. He muttered, wondering if she had ever been taught to behave more subtly around royalty. As he took his seat, she adopted a respectful posture and asked if she was being polite enough. Then, just as casually, she mentioned that she knew the prince wasn't the type for unnecessary formalities. He was startled that she understood his preferences so well. With a sigh, he told her to finish the entire breakfast so he could at least request another serving. While she dug into the food, the prince began flipping through his new blueprints. Nightingale, curious, asked why he had been ordering so much iron lately, especially since it was the dead of winter. If he wanted to cool his whiskey, she pointed out, he could simply leave it outside. When she saw his order book wide open, Roland realized she must have seen all of his recent requests, so he fed her a story. He was trying to make cheese, and for that he needed temperatures below freezing. The girl praised him for his cleverness, but inside our hero admitted that this was a lie. He was hiding something far more confidential, something he did not entirely trust her with. Unlike Anna or Nana, he wanted to gather more information about Nightingale before revealing his actual secrets. In truth, he was developing guns, which were much easier to produce than steam engines. If anyone uncovered his methods too soon, it could derail his entire plan. The ion he had ordered was actually saltpeter, commonly used by wealthy nobles to cool their drinks in summer. Its fancy name disguised its more important function. It was a key ingredient in gunpowder, making secrecy even more critical. Changing the subject, the boy asked whether witches also trained assassins, aside from their search for the Holy Mountain. Nightingale explained that a group of oddballs had gathered together because of that shared dream. She herself had joined the Witch Cooperation Association 2 years ago. Hearing this, he asked if she had worked for someone else before joining the association, and whether anyone accepted witches at all. Setting down her plate, she laughed at the idea, calling it ridiculous. If her previous owner had known she had become a witch, he would never have allowed her into the front door. Worse, had she not proved useful to him later, he would have quietly disposed of her. The boy grew more curious and pressed her for details, but she fell silent, promising to explain everything when the time was right. She reassured him not to worry, saying she had been free for the last 5 years and had no intention of becoming anyone's pawn again. He stayed quiet, looking somewhat downcast. 5 days passed since their chat in the courtyard, and by then our hero had finally finished his first gun after a series of production challenges. He was thrilled to keep it to himself. One major reason he had been pursuing steam engines was to create a way to mass-produce guns, but he needed a working prototype before scaling up. At this pace, he worried he would only manage to make 4 guns before the demon months arrived. The knight, meanwhile, was scratching his head, trying to understand how these so-called muskets would help in fighting demons. The boy simply told him to gather the village's best hunters and form an elite squad to wield them. But the prince shuddered when the knight suggested using patrol guards instead. Considering how frail and puny they were, his reluctance to hand such valuable weapons to them was more than justified. Deep beneath Roland Castle, a few soldiers marched through the tunnels. Suddenly one of them leapt into the air and attacked another. The scar-faced soldier ordered the thin-mustached man to surrender or meet the same fate as their fallen comrade, Greymutt. Remembering his friend, the thin-mustached soldier grew furious and swore he would never let these hooligans set foot in the castle. With a burst of strength, he flung the scar-faced man back, sending his sword flying. He then drove his own blade into the man's left shoulder, declaring it was for Greymutt. Bleeding heavily, Scarface scoffed, shocked that an ordinary patrol guard could injure him. The thin-mustached soldier grew even more irritated at the remark. He made it clear that while Scarface had spent his time gambling and sleeping in taverns, he and his friends had been training daily to protect their hometown. He swore he would not allow Long Song and his cronies to disturb their village's peace. As he leapt forward to finish his opponent, another cocky figure joined the fight and stabbed him straight through the chest. The poor soldier writhed in pain from the dagger wound and collapsed to the ground. The intruders stood confidently over him. Shockingly, the thin-mustached man managed to pull the dagger from his chest despite the agony. With one swift motion, he hurled it toward a nearby torch. The blade shattered the torch, extinguishing the flame and plunging the corridor into darkness. Up in the castle's food storage, the thin-mustached soldier hid inside one of the bins. He was certain the infiltrators were here to sabotage the food supply. If they succeeded in spoiling everything, Border Town would be forced to evacuate to Longsong Fortress. The thought crushed him. While the prince worked tirelessly to improve the town, he had failed to protect a vital food reserve. Suddenly the door behind him creaked open. His face drained of color as the same rowdy soldiers stormed in. One of them grabbed him by the collar and slammed him to the ground, ordering him to stop running and surrender to Duke Ryan's demands. In case anyone had forgotten, Duke Ryan was the white-haired aristocrat determined to keep the prince far away from his territory. Despite the threat, the soldier stood his ground, he boldly declared that his prince would foil Duke Ryan's plans. The intruders laughed at the idea, brushing off the prince as insignificant. Their leader ordered his men to finish off the soldier and ruin the food stores while they were at it. Without hesitation, a lackey struck the thin-mustached soldier on the head. As consciousness slipped away from him, he wondered if this was how he would die. But fate had other plans. Nightingale appeared in the doorway. She coolly asked whether the intruders were enjoying themselves in someone else's territory, then warned that their little party was about to end. They demanded to know who she thought she was. Nightingale replied that she was simply a local from Border Town, then mocked them for looking like sewer rats sneaking out of the drains. The intruders clearly had no idea how outmatched they were. Their leader barked at his crew to attack the mysterious woman. She only smiled. In a blur of motion, she swung her hand and bodies immediately hit the ground. With fading vision, the wounded soldier watched this enigmatic figure dispatch the intruders effortlessly. Before he could understand what had happened, he slipped into unconsciousness. The next day, their corpses lay scattered across the food storage. The knight inspecting the scene scratched his head, trying to piece together who could have taken out the intruders so cleanly. He knew the injured thin-mustached soldier could not have done it. The only explanation was that some outsider had intervened, an expert who required no assistance. Their moves were so precise that the enemies stood no chance. Not a single barrel was toppled, no blood smeared, not even a scratch marked the floor. The knight began to suspect that someone with extraordinary skill in the sword arts was nearby. Feeling a surge of pride, he thought of his clan's long history of knightly tradition. The investigating soldier added his report. The autopsies were finished, and the bodies identified. 8 were from Longsong's guard, and 1 remained unidentifiable. When asked about survivors, he explained that Captain Brian was receiving special healing, while Scarface had been thrown into the dungeon and locked away. The knight ordered Scarface to be awakened immediately for interrogation. Meanwhile, the prince was irritated. He had barely made any progress in his new initiatives, yet enemies were already trying to undermine him. Still, he felt grateful that Nightingale had intervened. She reassured him that the intruders never would have reached him anyway, not with Anna sleeping right beneath his floor. That was when the prince had an idea. He proposed that Nightingale become his secret bodyguard. He offered generous pay, living quarters with a garden, 2 days off per week, and paid vacations. Despite the enticing deal, she politely declined, explaining that she could not leave the association or her friends. The prince suggested bringing her entire group to Border Town, insisting that there was plenty of room after the recent expansion. He promised they would face no discrimination and could live freely. Once again she declined, saying she might consider it in the future. The prince was left feeling awkward after being turned down so directly. He then asked if she had safely escorted Nana home after healing the soldiers. Nightingale confirmed that she had. Nana had been frightened by the sight of so many wounded people, which was understandable. She was used to tending chickens, not treating human injuries. Returning to the conversation, the boy asked Nightingale whether she had figured out which of his siblings might be behind the infiltration. She shook her head. This time, it wasn't one of his siblings at all. The culprits had bribed Border Town's patrol guards, and their plan was so sloppy they even left 2 witnesses alive. Witnesses who didn't even have the nerve to take their own lives before being caught. She assured him they would uncover the truth soon, since the chief knight was already interrogating one of the infiltrators. She also pointed out how surprisingly weak and tearful these intruders were compared to the third princess's assassin. While peace returned outside the castle, our hero walked beside the chief knight to visit the thin-mustached soldier. When the soldier saw the prince enter the room, he was shocked and scrambled upright in bed. The prince began by praising Brian for his bravery and the fight he put up, but Brian grew emotional, insisting that the real hero was his fallen friend, the one who had sacrificed himself. The prince reassured him that his friend's funeral would honor him properly. As for Scarface, he would face full punishment. He was scheduled to hang in 3 days, and the prince hoped Brian would recover in time to witness it. Thin Mustache then mentioned that Scarface supposedly had noble blood, hinting this might cause trouble with Longsong Fortress. The prince dismissed the concern. Scarface might have been distantly related to the Elk family, but he had no title or land. Besides, he had tried to burn down Border Town's food stores, an act too serious to overlook. After promising that someone else would handle patrols, the prince ordered Brian to focus on healing. Once the demon months arrived, he intended to honor him as a brave knight of the prince. Next, we moved to the city wall, where the new recruits were training under Hunter Ironaxe. When Ironaxe spotted the prince approaching, he barked for everyone to stand at attention. The prince, however, seemed to have no idea what to say during an inspection. Awkwardly, he walked up to a random soldier and asked, with a friendly smile, how training was going and whether he was eating enough. The soldier looked terrified, while the prince appeared to be imitating something he had once seen on TV. Suddenly, the soldier dropped to his knees, leaving the prince confused and more than a little unsettled. Tears welled in the soldier's eyes, and not just his. Many recruits were overwhelmed that the prince had personally come to check on them. The prince gently urged the soldier to stand. It was clear the meals he had been providing had lifted their spirits and strengthened them. He reminded everyone that they were free to share suggestions or complaints, and promised they would always have enough to eat. Out of nowhere, the shy boy from earlier raised his hand. He pointed out that their civilian army was too small, and with the way they were training, they might not stand a chance against the demons. Murmurs spread through the crowd as others admitted they felt the same. Some wondered if the prince planned to hire mercenaries. But the hero raised his hand and cut off the speculation. With a grin, he asked the boy for his name. Nervously, the soldier introduced himself as Vanner. The prince praised his insight and agreed that relying solely on a civilian army made little sense. However, he reminded them that demons were simply mutated beasts, not nearly as intelligent as humans. Iron Axe backed him up, confirming the beasts behaved just as the prince described, though he noted that hybrids posed a more formidable challenge. The prince then explained his idea. They would use fences, ditches, and hills to guide the dumb beasts into carefully prepared traps. He was confident the strategy would work, given how simplistic the creature's instincts were. Iron Axe still looked uneasy, reminding everyone that bows and spears would be useless in close combat. The prince smirked, knowing exactly why traditional weapons would fail. That was why he had created a new kind of weapon, stronger and more reliable than an entire squad of armored knights. The crowd buzzed with excitement. At the testing grounds, a massive explosion suddenly tore through the area. The blast shook the earth, stunning the recruits. While everyone else was horrified, the prince was ecstatic. His gunpowder experiment had worked perfectly. Iron Axe muttered that it felt like the wrath of God itself had struck the land. The explosion left a huge crater and obliterated the test rabbits. The prince told everyone to come closer and examine the scene so they could record useful data. He was thrilled that mixing a few elements in the right proportions could produce such power. With everything wiped out by the blast, Iron Axe suggested they wouldn't have to fear monsters at all if they had access to such a weapon. But the prince reminded them that they would never have enough gunpowder. Before the month of demons arrived, the prince was still excited about relying mainly on guns and crossbows while using gunpowder weapons as their trump card. In the next scene, Nightingale described how the world looked through her eyes. Everything appeared in black and white, with no fixed boundaries. Paths twisted and overlapped, shifting direction at will. Up, down, left, and right were meaningless. By navigating these ever-changing lines, she could soar through space with a bird's-eye perspective, passing through anything that wasn't black or white. At times, she could see faint hints of color. Witches especially stood out. They carried the essence of magic, and she could sense that magic flowing within them, waxing and waning like a pulse. Among all witches, only they possessed something truly extraordinary. Anna's magic, however, was unique and vibrantly rich. Her presence glowed more brightly than any other. Suddenly Anna called out to her, pulling her back into the real world. When Anna asked what she was doing, Nightingale smoothly changed the subject, offering fish cakes she had brought along. Anna's face lit up instantly. Nightingale hesitated, saying she needed to wash her hands first, but instead of using water, Anna simply cleansed them with a burst of flame. Nightingale was stunned. It hit her then that Anna was the only witch among them with such exceptional dangerous power. That realization filled her with dread. With the month of demons approaching, Nightingale feared Anna might suffer unbearable pain during her coming-of-age transformation. She gently suggested that Anna join the Witch Cooperation Association, where the others could support her. Everyone would be thrilled to welcome someone as powerful as Anna, but her tone shifted when she quietly admitted that she herself might not survive the winter. Anna then asked where Nightingale had lived before joining the association. Nightingale replied that she once lived in a large city east of the capital. When Anna asked if she had been happy there, Nightingale's mind instantly flashed to her past. Cold shackles, a magic-suppressing locket, and a life of misery. Rather than answer, she turned the question back to Anna. Anna opened up. She had lived a harsh life in the slums of Bordertown. Her father had sold her to the church for 25 golden royals. It was the prince who had freed her. Now she was genuinely happy to be in the castle. Nightingale gently reminded her that leaving wasn't an option, given the hatred most people held toward witches. But Anna remained hopeful, believing the prince could change things for them. Their conversation was abruptly cut short when Nana burst through the door, crying and clinging to Anna. Something terrible was about to happen. Meanwhile, our hero was fast asleep, dreaming of glorious exploits. Nightingale violently shook him awake, furious. Nana's father was on his way, and he suspected his daughter was a witch. Shocked, the prince scrambled to prepare. Perhaps he now had a chance to keep Nana in the castle. He imagined the father pleading for help, begging the prince to protect her secret. Reality shattered those expectations instantly. When the prince stepped outside, Nana's father was livid, demanding his daughter be returned at once. After they sat down, the restless father called Nana over. Terrified, she asked if he planned to sell her to the church again. Her father scoffed, saying the church would never accept someone as clueless as her. He ordered her to come home. But the prince intervened, reminding him that Nana was a witch. The man rejected the idea entirely. Even when Nana confirmed it herself, he grew angry and suggested Teacher Carl must be misleading another child. The prince looked at Anna and gave a small nod. Anna raised her hand and demonstrated her fiery powers. The old man froze, shocked beyond words. The prince urged him to calm down, promising to explain everything. Gradually, Mr. Pine began to understand. His daughter wasn't being harmed. She was here to learn how to control her abilities. Still, the prince felt unnerved when he realized Mr. Pine had assumed he was luring little girls into the castle for inappropriate reasons. Finally, the prince got to the point Nana had healing powers that would be invaluable during the demon months, when the wounded would desperately need her help. But Mr. Pine declined. The danger was too great. The prince countered that opportunities always came with risks. He reminded Mr. Pine of his own family lineage. Nana's grandfather and Mr. Pine's father had been courageous knights, earning their family noble status through heroic deeds. Mr. Pine agreed proudly, recalling how his father once killed an unusually powerful demon. The creature's massive horns still hung above their fireplace. But then the prince gently pointed out that the Pine family was not as prestigious as it once had been. Now, they were simply working-class citizens. Mr. Pine sadly admitted that the prince was right about his family's decline. The prince then noticed the man's rough, calloused hands, evidence that Pine had never abandoned his warrior spirit and still trained daily to hone his sword skills. Seeing an opportunity, the prince cleverly suggested that Pine join the town's defenses. If he helped protect Border Town, the prince promised to grant him enough land to restore his family to true noble status. It was a tempting offer, but Pine shook his head. He refused to gamble his daughter's life for any reward, and insisted Nana would be safer in Longsong Fortress. The prince reminded him that Longsong was far from safe. The church had eyes and ears everywhere there. If word got out that Nana was a witch, not even he could protect her. He assured Pine that if things grew dangerous, he would prepare a small boat for a quick escape to Longsong, ensuring both Nana and Anna could flee without risk. Finally, Mr. Pine exhaled, placing his trust in the prince. He bowed respectfully and pledged his loyalty, declaring he would fight for the prince's cause. Relief washed through the room. Everyone smiled, except Anna. She pouted in clear frustration, furious that the prince would even consider sending her away. She declared that she wasn't going anywhere. The next day, the old constable arrived, looking distressed. He fretted that they had burned through almost all their money on weapons and training. At this rate, he feared the entire town would starve within months. The prince face-palmed and told him to dip into his personal savings to cover the budget. The old man agreed, but pointed out that this still wouldn't fix their long-term financial problems. The prince shrugged, saying that if their defenses failed, they would simply evacuate the town. Then he sent the constable away to handle the matter. Once he left, the prince felt crushed. Every coin he had saved was now gone, and if the defenses still collapsed, everything would fall apart. His mood lifted only when Nightingale suddenly appeared. She immediately noted that he had lied to the constable about evacuating. The prince admitted it. He didn't want to spread fear among the already anxious townspeople. Nightingale told him he should spend more time with Anna rather than worrying about politics. She confessed her fear that Anna might not survive the winter, but the prince insisted she would. Anna had promised she would defeat the demons no matter what. Nightingale asked how he could put such trust in a witch cursed by demonic influence. He simply shrugged, saying he believed in her, and in Nightingale as well. Her expression softened. For the first time she realized his faith wasn't an act. He added that he never lied without a good reason. Suddenly, a noise outside caught her attention. She glanced through the window, visibly tense. It was snowing. Winter had officially arrived. The prince decided to check on Hunter Ironaxe at the shooting range. Ironaxe was firing the guns with precision, hitting bullseye after bullseye. When the prince greeted him, Ironaxe lit up with excitement. He proudly reported that he had mastered all the basics he'd been taught. The prince wasn't surprised. Ironaxe had always been a natural warrior capable of mastering any weapon placed in his hands. The hunter praised the iron pipe of the gods, marveling at its devastating power. He grit his teeth, saying that if he'd had such a weapon during his encounter with the hybrid beast, it wouldn't have survived a second. Overwhelmed, he dropped to his knees, vowing he would never betray the prince's trust. The prince then checked in with Chief Knight Carter, who looked tense. They needed more than just the 2 guns currently available. The prince understood and assured him that 2 more were already being built. He admitted they had rushed the gunpowder development simply because the month of demons had arrived so fast. Up on the city wall, soldiers bowed their heads when the prince arrived. He felt embarrassed, wishing he had taught them proper military etiquette. Ironaxe pointed out that demons were rare after the first snowfall, but the prince warned him not to relax. Then they spotted something in the distance. A demon alone, approaching slowly. Panic flickered among the soldiers. One asked if he should sound the alarm. The prince told him to decide for himself. He had more experience now. After a moment, the soldier chose not to sound the alarm and lowered his bow. The prince felt relieved. Their training was finally paying off. The creature picked up speed, charging toward the wall. Squinting, the prince wondered if it was a mutated fox. Iron Axe confirmed that the beast had recently been possessed and posed minimal danger. Still, as it prepared to leap over the wall, Iron Axe drew his bow. Carter stepped in front of the prince protectively. The beast lunged. Iron Axe's arrow flew through the air and struck the demon instantly, dropping it dead on the spot. The prince leaned over the wall, observing the strange black blood oozing from its corpse. He wondered why demonic beasts bled like that and why witches could recover from demonic influence while animals never could. Curious, he asked whether someone bitten by a demon could transform into a mindless ghoul. Iron Axe scoffed, insisting no such creatures existed. The prince let out a sigh of relief, comforted that he wouldn't have to deal with a zombie apocalypse on top of everything else. He then asked if the demon sep's meat was edible. The knight almost had a heart attack. Why on earth, he demanded, would the prince even consider eating cursed meat? The hunter agreed, recalling the time he once fed a chunk of demon flesh to his hunting dogs, which immediately killed them. The boy sighed in disappointment, thinking it was a total waste of good meat. Both the knight and the hunter were stunned that the prince had actually considered eating it, but our hero reminded them how scarce food had become. It would have been a blessing if they could have eaten the meat they were hunting down. Suddenly a soldier burst into the room, shouting that someone was hurt. It wasn't a guard this time, but a worker from the northern mines. Meanwhile, Nana sat alone until Nightingale appeared out of nowhere, asking if she was bored. The little girl nearly jumped out of her skin, terrified by the sudden appearance. Nightingale quickly apologized and explained that Anna was still busy with her work, and might return soon. When Nana asked if Anna was still dealing with those dirty mounds, Nightingale nodded. Nightingale then sat down and absent-mindedly grabbed Anna's tea without asking. It was clear that Nana was feeling discouraged about her new assignment. The prince had tasked her with healing the wounded guards. It wasn't that she disliked the work, but seeing the injured men left her shaken. She wanted to overcome her fear so she could keep using her ability properly and wished she were as brave as Anna. Suddenly, Nightingale spotted someone approaching, and a soldier rushed in, urgently telling Nana to come downstairs at once. A severely injured patient needed her help. In the infirmary, the wounded man screamed in agony, begging his prince to end the unbearable pain. Seeing the miner so desperate made our hero uneasy. He wondered whether the man's burns came from the steam engine malfunction at the northern mines. Nana stepped into the room, trembling as she approached the charred miner. Her father gently placed a reassuring hand on her head. Nana swallowed her fear, steadied herself, and declared she was ready. Once the curtains were drawn, she took a deep breath, summoned her power, and began healing him. Moments later, the man was completely recovered, looking as fresh as a newly picked cucumber. Her father, witnessing her healing ability for the first time, was stunned and proud, calling it nothing short of a miracle. Knight Brian happily chimed in, saying that Nana had once saved him from the brink of death too. The prince immediately panicked, signaling him to keep quiet. Nana had healed him in secret, without her father knowing, and he wasn't eager to face the man's anger over it. Now fully conscious and healed, the miner couldn't believe he was alive. Prince Roland assured him it was real and revealed that Nana, one of the witches, had saved him. Later that night, when our hero returned to his room, Nightingale greeted him and demanded to know why he had revealed Nana's secret so soon. This led him to recall the moment when the miner learned she was a witch and panicked, shouting about witches being devils. Nana's father quickly shut him down, reminding him that his daughter had saved his life and had nothing to do with devils. Overwhelmed with guilt, the miner dropped to his knees before Nana, apologizing and thanking her profusely. Back in the present, our hero explained that revealing her identity had been the right move. If they planned to use her powers against demons in the coming months, hiding the truth would become impossible anyway. Besides, the church forces had already departed for Longsong Fortress, leaving no one behind to harass the witches. Nightingale asked if he had planned all of this from the beginning. The boy confirmed it. With the snow blocking the roads and the seaports under his control, the church had no way of learning what was happening in Border Town, let alone taking action. This gave him 3 full months to change the public's view of witches. He pointed out how Nana was now seen as an angel by the soldiers she healed. As she continued treating the wounded, morale would rise, and the townspeople's prejudice would slowly fade. Nightingale still didn't understand why he was doing so much for the witches, so she asked him directly. Our hero repeated that Border Town did not judge anyone by their origin. Even those as hated as witches deserved to live on this land just like everyone else. The woman's eyes widened as she heard our hero's grand plans. It was clear she had something important to confess. She admitted she hadn't been entirely honest with him earlier. The prince was caught off guard, and she began explaining how her sisters in the association had been wandering for years, losing hope along the way. Now all they wanted was a safe place where they could be happy, even if it was just a single castle. At first, the boy didn't understand what she meant, but then the realization struck him. she was actually open to bringing all the witches to Bordertown. Before he could get too excited, she grounded him with a warning. If witches gathered at the castle, he would eventually have to face the church. The boy calmly reassured her. The church's main headquarters was far away, and even if they learned that witches were living in Bordertown, they wouldn't march all the way to Greycastle just for him. He was already planning to gather enough influence to rival the church, and create a world where witches could live alongside ordinary people. He dreamed of expanding that world throughout Greycastle, and maybe even across the entire kingdom. The scene then shifted to the capital of Greycastle. Soldiers on horseback marched through the streets until their captain suddenly called for a halt. The man looked eager, finally returning to the castle. Fireworks lit up the sky as the people welcomed the one approaching the city gates. Gerald Wimbledon, the first Prince of Greycastle. It was amusing how these people had enough explosive material for fireworks, even though it had only been a few chapters since our hero invented gunpowder in this primitive world. The gates lowered, and Prince Gerald entered the city with his entourage. Once inside, he wasted no time announcing that he had come to claim what was rightfully his from his father. 3 shady figures appeared, bowing before him and reporting that they had completed their assigned task. Gerald asked if they had managed to replace the royal guards as planned. The lackey admitted there had been complications. They had only managed to replace the guards in the king's chamber. Gerald dismissed the issue, saying that as long as he and his men could enter the castle, everything would go according to plan. The lackey reassured him that no one would be able to stop their entry. An old man stepped forward, mentioning that Gerald's fate star, the Heaven Star, was leaving the equinox, and would disappear from this hemisphere in about 4 months. He asked Gerald if he remembered what the movement of that star signified. Gerald drifted into his childhood memories of playing with his younger siblings, then snapped back and said he understood perfectly. It meant the time had come to break the rules of the challenge their father had set, and Gerald would take the throne of Greycastle. Approaching the king's room, Gerald suddenly noticed a strange metallic scent. He asked about the smell of blood. The old man explained that the king had summoned a servant girl, who realized the guards had been switched. They had to dispose of her. Strangely, the king hadn't called for any women since their mother passed away. As they approached the door, the old man pointed out the absence of patrols, which made moving around the area easier. Gerald scoffed, saying he wasn't sneaking around like a rat but walking in proudly to discuss inheritance. And if talking didn't work, he had other methods in mind. He gripped his sword, leaned closer to the door, and the blood smell intensified. He peeked inside, then smashed the door open. Inside, he found his father lying dead with a dagger in his chest, and standing over the body was his younger brother, Timothy Wimbledon, the second Prince of Greycastle. Seeing his brother, Timothy claimed he hadn't wanted to do this, but he had no choice, just as Gerald apparently had no choice but to come here. Almost immediately, soldiers emerged behind Gerald, surrounding him and catching him by surprise. Gerald demanded to know how long Timothy had been planning this. Timothy explained that their father's decree was like a chess match. He had intended to follow the rules, but the third princess had started playing dirty. He accused Gerald of doing the same, pointing out that the first prince wouldn't have rushed across the kingdom without being tipped off by his astrologer lackey. It became clear that the lackey had betrayed Gerald as well. The old man insisted he hadn't lied. When the Heaven Star leaves the equinox, it symbolizes a seeker losing their way, but it also foretells downfall. Infuriated, Gerald shouted at his brother, reminding him that he had always been their father's favorite, given every advantage, yet he was the one who killed the king. Timothy only grinned, shamelessly pointing out Gerald's hypocrisy. After all, Gerald had also come here prepared to kill their father if negotiations failed. Gerald trembled, shaken by the brutal truth. He asked Timothy if he had lured him here intentionally to eliminate him as well. Timothy simply shrugged, saying he never planned to confront their sister. He only needed to wait in place to kill his older brother. He even admitted he was impressed that their sister had foreseen all of this before the decree was ever written. Timothy went on to explain that he wanted to end the royal decree early because his Valencia city wasn't like their sister's Clearwater port, which was producing warriors like rabbits. He needed an army, one big enough to challenge her, and that would only be possible if he possessed the Greycastle crown. The first prince, enraged, charged at Timothy, but the surrounding soldiers quickly intercepted him. One struck him from behind with a spear, forcing him to his knees before his brother. Timothy coldly informed Gerald that he would be framed for killing the king and condemned as a murderer, destined to meet the guillotine. The soldiers pinned Gerald down as he protested furiously, demanding to know whether Timothy even had the right to judge him. He vowed to expose Timothy's crimes to the world, but Timothy had already prepared for that. He revealed a potion called the Silencer. Once someone drank it, their voice would be permanently stolen. With Gerald executed and no other heirs in line, Timothy planned to play the grieving son flawlessly and claim the throne without resistance. He even urged his brother to curse their sister for the cruel fate he was about to suffer. As soldiers dragged Gerald away, his mind drifted to childhood memories one last time. The astrologer servant, the traitor, began addressing Timothy as king, proudly proclaiming the crown was now his. Timothy praised the man for his loyalty, then immediately pulled out a deadly pill and ordered him to swallow it if he wished to avoid becoming a future liability. Timothy then turned back toward his father's corpse, gritting his teeth in frustration. A flashback revealed the truth. When Timothy had warned the king that Gerald was heading for the capital with plans to forcibly seize the throne, the king simply grinned maniacally. Before Timothy could make sense of it, the king drew a dagger and plunged it into his own chest, killing himself instantly. Now in the present, Timothy was infuriated, desperate to discover who was manipulating the chaos behind their fight for succession. He was determined to hunt down whoever had interfered. The women who had visited the king earlier were likely involved. Back in Border Town, things had been peaceful. The steam engine prototype in the mines had been repaired, no accidents had occurred, and no demons had shown up recently. Our hero had been enjoying a rare moment of calm, brainstorming ways to grow the town's economy and refill his empty coffers. But that peace shattered when a night burst in with alarming news. A massive horde of demons was swarming outside the walls. At the border, below the fortress wall, monstrous howls echoed through the air. The soldiers stationed atop the wall looked horrified by the sheer number of creatures. Among them was Vanner, a former miner who had joined the army simply to eat eggs. One of the beasts charged the wall, slamming into it with tremendous force and shaking the entire structure. The impact left a noticeable crack in the stone, though the monster collapsed moments later. A pack of wolf-like demons began advancing next. Hunter Ironaxe barked orders, telling everyone to brace their spears. As the wolves scaled the wall, Vanner gathered his courage and thrust his spear on command. One wolf managed to leap onto the rampart, but the captain quickly drew his gun and shot it through the skull. With the immediate threat neutralized, Ironaxe warned everyone to remain alert. Suddenly a soldier cried out as a creature pierced his abdomen, spilling his innards. The sight nearly sent Vanner into shock. Fortunately, the knight and the prince arrived in time. The knight reminded Vanner of his training, snapping him back to his senses. Vanner immediately ordered the wounded man taken to the hospital while the others held their ground. The prince couldn't help but smile at Vanner's discipline. All those eggs had not gone to waste after all. They had helped build a competent civilian army. Then something unexpected caught everyone's attention. Even our hero recoiled at the sight of it. The hunter, equally horrified, drew his gun. They had encountered a monstrosity unlike anything they had seen. A massive behemoth that defied the rules of biology. Our hero had never imagined facing such a mutant creature. The soldiers released a barrage of arrows, but it was like firing toothpicks at a tank. The arrows bounced harmlessly off its thick armor-like hide. The troops looked toward their leader in panic, uncertain of what to do. The monster's steps shook the earth as it lumbered forward. Realizing they needed more firepower, our hero ordered the muskets loaded. When the creature drew close enough, the soldiers opened fire, but it was about as effective as trying to stop a T-Rex with a water gun. The soldiers began panicking when even the muskets proved useless against the monstrous behemoth. The prince quickly ordered them to calm down, then instructed Vice Captain Vanner to gather a few men and fetch dynamite from the storage room. As he was giving orders and trying to regain control of the situation, bam! The colossal monster smashed through the very wall they had worked so hard to build. At this point, the prince was certain they were in serious trouble. He had never expected the creature to be this powerful, and immediately ordered a retreat before the situation spiraled completely out of control. As the wall crumbled beneath him, Nightingale swooped in and caught him just before he fell, carrying him safely back to solid ground. Once they landed, the boy asked why she had come. Nightingale explained she had rushed over because she was worried, and clearly her fears had been justified. She then asked how he planned to deal with the monster. Our hero assured her he still had a trick up his sleeve. Right on cue, Vanner returned carrying a bundle of dynamite. The prince shouted for Vanner to light the fuse and toss the explosives beneath the monster's legs. Poor Vanner, shaking in terror, struggled through the moment, but eventually got the fuse lit. He dropped the dynamite and ran for his life as the fuse sizzled down. Seconds later, boom, a massive explosion rocked the battlefield, hitting the behemoth square in the abdomen. The soldiers erupted in cheers as the giant creature collapsed, lifeless. The prince grinned like he had just aced an exam, but their celebration ended abruptly when they saw more beasts approaching, not mutants, but regular demonic creatures, and plenty of them. The soldiers scrambled to raise their shields as panic spread. In the chaos, a massive demon boar charged toward them. One soldier lying on the ground stared in disbelief as a girl stepped directly into its path. That girl was Anna. Not just any girl, Anna, the witch he had tried to keep away from danger. Anna stood fearlessly, eyes fixed on the raging boar. She summoned her power, and flames burst from her hands, engulfing the beast and roasting it alive. Our hero's jaw dropped. He had been so focused on using her only for construction and town projects that he had never imagined her potential on the battlefield. No wonder he had kept her in the sick bay. He wanted her protected. He had no idea how she had gotten past everyone. Knight Brian dropped to his knees, reporting that Anna had been worried about the prince's safety and insisted on coming to the wall. He couldn't stop her. Originally, the prince had planned to slowly shift public opinion using Anna's healing abilities. Once the people accepted witches, he would reveal Anna publicly, but now the secret was out, whether he liked it or not. He ordered Brian and Nightingale to protect Anna at all costs. Meanwhile, Anna stepped forward as soldiers instinctively formed a protective circle around her. With fierce determination, she raised her hands again. Flames ignited and surged upward, forming a blazing wall within the breach, blocking the monsters from advancing further. Our heroes stood stunned by her magnificent display, but the monsters kept emerging through the fire. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the prince knew exactly what he needed to do. He grabbed the knight's gun and began firing at the monsters, aiming straight for their heads. His sudden burst of courage shocked everyone. Raising his weapon high, the prince rallied the troops, commanding them to ready their spears and charge. His voice echoed across the battlements, urging them to defend their wall and protect Bordertown. The soldiers roared in response, filled with new determination. Together they fought fiercely until the last wolf fell, riddled with arrows. Only then did the soldiers finally savor their victory. The knight was astonished by how effectively they had defended their territory, but as the adrenaline faded, the prince suddenly remembered Anna. Panic washed over him. How was he going to explain her identity as a witch to the civilian army? He frantically searched for her, but then something surprising caught his eye. The soldiers weren't calling her a devil or a cursed being, they were showing her respect, gratitude, admiration. Her fiery power, terrifying as it was, had earned their trust. Anna approached the prince, completely drained from the battle. She barely managed a few steps before collapsing into his arms. The scene then shifted to Clearwater Port at Garcia's residence, where the third princess received shocking news. The king was dead. According to the letter, their older brother Gerald, the first prince, had been accused of assassinating him, and was now imprisoned. They claimed the king hadn't died by suicide, but had been executed under the orders of the officials. Garcia's knight was completely thrown off and found the entire situation far too suspicious. After a moment of hesitation, Garcia admitted that her brother Gerald could be foolish at times, but he certainly wasn't foolish enough to wish for death. She explained that Timothy was trying to shift the blame onto Gerald to deceive the public, but taking full control of Greycastle wouldn't happen overnight. She had adjusted her plans accordingly. Her knight still couldn't understand why Timothy would pull such a reckless stunt, especially when their father had always favored him. That was when the princess dropped a truth bomb. Timothy feared her. At the mere sight of her black flag, he trembled. She pointed out that Timothy's actions were unnecessary. Yes, he was laying the blame for their father's murder on Gerald, but he couldn't fool the kingdom forever. If he hoped to seize all of Greycastle, he would need a long-term plan, not a desperate frame job. So she decided she would not sit back and watch. She was setting sail for Greycastle the next morning. Her knight nervously asked whether she intended to confront Timothy. Garcia told him plainly, if Timothy wasn't going to wait for the 5-year decree to end naturally, neither would she. The knight anxiously mentioned that the entire kingdom must be mourning the king's death by now. Garcia casually asked if he expected her to shed a tear as well. He quickly said no and knelt, awaiting further orders. She commanded him to fetch the captain of the Black Fleet. They would depart as soon as possible. Meanwhile, back in Bordertown, things had calmed down after the massive monster raid. No further attacks had occurred, and the injured soldiers were treated and returned to duty quickly. The chief knight was tasked with using the hybrid monster's shell to reinforce the broken wall, merging it into the existing barrier. The largest factor in their victory had been Anna's devastating power, but weeks had passed since Anna collapsed, and she still had not awakened. Nightingale reminded everyone that today was supposed to be Anna's maturity day. She feared Anna might die in her sleep, since witches could only survive the pain of maturity while conscious. Somberly, she revealed she had seen far too many witches die, treated like animals, burned, tortured by nobles for twisted entertainment. The lucky ones lived in exile, endlessly chasing the mythical Holy Mountain, a dream they never reached. But Anna was different. Unlike the sisters of the association, Anna was cared for here, valued, respected. Nightingale explained that this was what the Holy Mountain truly represented, a life free from prejudice. Anna had already achieved it. Memories of Anna flooded the prince's mind. Her strength, her determination, the day she vowed to remain at his side. He clutched her hand firmly, refusing to let her slip away. As midnight struck, Nightingale sensed the start of Anna's maturity. Magic pulsed within her body. A candle nearby began glowing with an eerie green light, startling the prince. He wondered whether it was the influence of demonic spirits. Yet nothing seemed to happen to Anna herself. Suddenly the candle's flame shrank to a faint spark, triggering a wave of panic, especially for young Nana. Then the flame flared back to life, glowing brighter than before with vivid green energy. And then, without warning, Anna opened her eyes. Everyone froze in shock. Prince Roland rushed to her side asking how she felt. Anna seemed perfectly fine. She reached out her hand toward him, and the prince braced himself, only for a flame to flicker to life in her palm, glowing that same vivid green. Everyone stared, stunned. Gathering his courage, the prince carefully reached out to touch the flame, and the scene shifted abruptly to the office, where our heroes sat in complete shock. Nightingale had just informed him that she was planning to leave Bordertown. She explained that Anna's awakening was miraculous in more ways than one. Not only had Anna survived maturity, but she had also survived demonic possession, something unheard of. Nightingale added that Anna's new green flames responded perfectly to her will. She could control their temperature, shape, and movement within a radius of 5 meters. Still, Anna had somehow avoided the excruciating pain that came with maturity, which Nightingale found baffling. The prince theorized that Anna must have depleted her magic completely during the battle at the wall. With her magic tank empty, the pressure inside her body wouldn't have built up enough to cause unbearable agony. Witches normally kept their magic hidden, causing it to accumulate dangerously before maturity, like a pressure cooker waiting to explode. Nightingale nodded, admitting the explanation made sense, which meant she had no time to waste. Winter was coming, and that meant countless witches across the land would soon face their own painful transformations. She needed to return to the association immediately, gather any survivors, and bring them back to Bordertown, hoping the prince would give them the same protection he had given Anna. But Roland urged her to stay, at least until the demons stopped appearing, and the weather settled. Nightingale smirked. Arriving at the association even a day early could save lives, she said. Besides, the demons wouldn't detect her. She would be fine. And with that, her departure was set. The prince then asked Nightingale about her own awakening, but she brushed it off, explaining that spring was beginning and she had long grown used to the pain. Still, he advised her to take care on the road. After offering her respects to Roland one last time, she vanished abruptly as always. Her sudden disappearance, as usual, unsettled him. He had never gotten used to her habit of appearing and disappearing without warning. Left alone, Roland sank into deep thought. If his theory about witches was correct, it could change everything, but his reflection was cut short when he glanced at his impossibly long list of pending tasks. Just as he wondered where to begin, his consultant burst in with urgent news. A messenger from Longsong Fortress had arrived. The ambassador was unusually anxious. Roland immediately sensed something was wrong. His suspicions were confirmed when he read the message. The king was dead. The ambassador quickly clarified that he had come under Duke Ryan's orders. The 5-year royal decree had ended, and Timothy Wimbledon was now recognized as the new king of Greycastle. Then came the final revelation. Timothy intended to reward Prince Roland with new territory and a new official title. Roland was stunned. Moments later, his consultant expressed sorrow over the king's death, supposedly at the hands of the first prince, and asked what their next move should be. Roland answered that the entire situation felt suspicious. He intended to make decisions only after observing the movements of his 2 sisters. He admitted he knew little about the 5th princess, but he was sure she wasn't the type to take reckless risks. Following her lead seemed logical. He also suspected chaos would grip the capital during this power shift. Their top priority had to be securing the safety of their families. He ordered the consultant to instruct the chief knight and castle staff to write letters home and have their families escorted to other towns for protection. The consultant thanked him for his consideration. Roland then announced more changes. He would stop exporting metals, and would sell only gemstones and minerals to Willowtown. He wanted the metals for himself to build more machinery. Additionally, he planned to recruit more civilians into the army and expand military training. In a way, the ambassador's news had become a blessing in disguise. Roland felt confident that simply staying in Bordertown would eventually draw trouble, especially from Duke Ryan of Longsong Fortress. After the months of demons, Ryan would no doubt attempt to extend his influence into the Western Territory under the new administration. But that was precisely what Roland wanted. His top priority was industrialization, and what he lacked most was manpower. Bordertown had barely 2,000 people, far too few to fuel his expanding projects. Buying slaves, recruiting high-level talent, or boosting birth rates were unrealistic. However, taking Longsong Fortress could grant him thousands of freed citizens and a massive boost in wealth. Assimilation would be easy, and it was the fastest way to grow the population and economy. Roland understood the challenges of confronting the entire fortress, but he would wait patiently for Nightingale to return with the witches. That was also why he desperately wanted to expand his civilian army and build more machinery. The scene then shifted to the northern mountain range, where Nightingale descended into one of the tunnels. Her path was suddenly blocked by roots sprouting from the ground. She introduced herself, and the roots withdrew. The witch controlling them, Leaf lit up with joy at the sight of her friend. After exchanging greetings, Leaf delivered grim news. One of the 2 younger witches, either Erin or Ashley, had failed to survive her maturity. They chose not to dwell on the tragedy and moved inside. Nightingale was eager to reunite with Wendy. When Wendy was called over, she immediately spun around and greeted Nightingale warmly, teasingly calling her Veronica. Taking Nightingale's hand, she made her blush. But Nightingale firmly insisted she wasn't the weak girl she once was, and no longer wished to be called by that name. Wendy gently reminded her that denying her past wouldn't change it. It was still part of who she was. Despite that, Nightingale was happy to see her, and the two embraced tightly. Wendy then asked about Anna and whether Nightingale had helped her through her maturity. With a smile, Nightingale revealed that Anna hadn't needed saving at all. In fact, what had happened to Anna could change the fate of all witches. Moments later, Nightingale told her sisters everything about the prince, how he allowed witches to live in Bordertown without discrimination, how he had personally saved Anna and Nana, and how he rejected the church's belief that witches were possessed by devils. He believed their powers came from within themselves, not from any demonic influence. To seal the truth, Nightingale reminded the group of her ability. She could smell lies, so they could trust every word she said. When Nightingale insisted the prince was serious, she revealed his plans to protect witches and even oppose the church if necessary. Then she pulled out the steam engine blueprints, proof that they could build a thriving sanctuary, one strong enough to rival the Holy Mountain itself. Just as she painted this hopeful picture, a green-haired woman barged in and demanded everyone be quiet. She seemed to be their teacher, and Nightingale immediately bowed her head in respect. The teacher gave her a cold stare, questioning whether Nightingale was calling the Holy Mountain something they had chased for generations, nothing more than a lie. The scene shifted to the new king, Timothy. A knight presented him with a stone known as Divine Judgment, supposedly the ultimate weapon against demonic forces. The knight boasted that the church had long proven its effectiveness in subduing witches. But Timothy was irritated. He blamed witches for his father's suicide and ordered the knight to continue capturing them and scour the capital for more. Back with Nightingale, she awoke tied to a pillar with a witch suppression stone locked around her neck. She tried to figure out how she ended up in this position. A flashback revealed the moment the green-haired teacher exploded at the suggestion of the prince aiding witches. She ranted that witches had suffered persecution for ages, and claimed that Nightingale had been deceived by the prince. To her, the agonizing pain of witch maturity was a sacred trial, one that shaped the mind and body of a true witch. Only those who endured it earned the right to ascend to the Holy Mountain and achieve peace. Nightingale was horrified. To the teacher, every fallen sister, every witch who died enduring that agony, was simply disqualified. Their suffering meant nothing. The teacher then offered Nightingale a final chance at forgiveness. If she repented, she would be shown mercy. But Nightingale refused. She would only leave with sisters who believed in her. As she attempted to walk away, a snake shot forward, coiling around her feet. Venom surged into her body, petrifying her instantly. She woke to find herself tied up, facing the teacher. Nightingale questioned why the woman was using Divine Judgment, a forbidden tool within the association. The teacher dismissed her concern. It was nothing more than a disciplinary tool for rebellious children, she said. She reminded Nightingale that Wendy had once saved her from the aristocrats. And now, instead of repaying that kindness, Nightingale was betraying them, handing them over to nobles just to repair her own relationships. Nightingale denied it. She insisted she only wanted her sisters to live free, without starvation, without persecution, without the torment of maturity. She emphasized that everyone deserved the right to choose their own fate. She even brought up the steam engine blueprint as proof that miracles were possible. The teacher scoffed. She tossed the blueprint into the fire, mocking the idea that a hunk of steel could ever move like a living creature. Then she grabbed a heated dagger and held it inches from Nightingale's throat. This would be Nightingale's last chance to beg for forgiveness. Otherwise, she would die as an example to all. Even facing death, Nightingale stayed defiant. She would rather be stabbed than bow. Wendy suddenly stepped forward, reminding everyone how many sisters they had already lost. They couldn't afford to lose another. The teacher, growing more frantic, demanded to know whether Wendy believed Nightingale's story. Wendy said she didn't plan to go to Bordertown herself, but she agreed that everyone should choose their own path. She asked if any witch wanted to leave with Nightingale. No one spoke. Seeing this, Wendy suggested letting Nightingale go alone. She had harmed no one, and there was no reason to kill her. Several sisters agreed and asked the teacher to release her. But the teacher snapped. She refused to let Nightingale go, fearing she would reveal the association's location to the church. She raised her dagger to strike. Before she could, Wendy hurled a coin at Nightingale, shattering the suppression stone. The teacher lunged at Wendy. Her snake struck and clamped onto Wendy's hand. But Nightingale reacted instantly. A metallic flash, a scream, and her sword pierced the teacher's chest. The woman collapsed before anyone could move. Nightingale and Wendy vanished into the shadows and fled the tunnels. But Wendy's condition quickly worsened. The poison spread from her bitten hand. To stop it from traveling further, Nightingale, heartbroken but determined, took out her dagger and severed Wendy's hand. She kept the severed hand, confident Nana could heal it later. Their journey was brutal. It took them 3 days just to reach this far, and carrying an injured Wendy slowed Nightingale even more. Wendy's blood loss made the situation dire. Nightingale feared she wouldn't last another 3 days. But just when all hope seemed lost, a mysterious newcomer appeared, ready to help. The newcomer looked like a boy at first glance, but she was actually a girl. She told Nightingale not to freak out. Her name was Lightning, and she had recently joined the Witch Association. Nightingale remained guarded, and asked if Kara had sent her. Lightning shrugged, saying Nightingale probably didn't recognize her because she was rarely around the base. She explained she wasn't there on orders. She came because, just like Nightingale had said earlier, everyone deserved to live life their own way, and Lightning had chosen to follow Nightingale. Simple as that. She added that she was thrilled by all the machinery and explosive dynamite Nightingale had talked about. She was an explorer at heart. After all, confused, Nightingale wondered why someone who loved adventure so much would join the association. Lightning explained that searching for the Holy Mountain was an adventure in itself, though the association was mostly about books, and Kara always had her nose buried in them. Nightingale asked if Lightning could fight. Lightning proudly said she could, and she could fly too, or so she thought. With Wendy slung over her shoulders, she struggled to stay off the ground. After a long moment of effort, she finally managed to float slightly. As they traveled, Lightning asked how long Nightingale had known Wendy, mentioning how Wendy had called her Veronica back at the base. Nightingale confirmed they went way back. She revealed that before joining the association, she had lived in Silver City where people treated her like a puppet. Wendy had shown her what it meant to truly live. She told Lightning she once had a family. At 13, her parents vanished during a commoner uprising. Her uncle took her and her brother Hyde in. That same year, her witch powers awakened. Her uncle realized she was a witch immediately and separated her from Hyde, locking her up and forcing her to train. He threatened Hyde's safety so she would use her abilities for his dirty work. She became an assassin, poisoning, ambushing, killing. The Gillen family grew rich, while her hands grew bloodier. Her powers were disturbingly suited for it. When she finally reunited with Hyde, he rejected her coldly, saying he wished he didn't have a witch for a sister. Heartbroken, she survived maturity alone. Her powers intensified, enabling her to break free. She killed her uncle and fled, lost in the world. Then she found Wendy, the first warmth she had felt in a long time. Wendy took her to the association, where Kara provided solace for their wounded souls. In the present, Lightning admitted that Kara had gone off the rails. She still couldn't believe a prince genuinely cared about witches. After a long journey, they finally reached Bordertown. Inside the familiar cottage, the prince kept sneezing, wondering who was thinking about him so intensely. Suddenly, a loud commotion erupted. The trio Nightingale, Lightning, and the unconscious Wendy crashed into the cottage. Anna immediately prepared for combat, but Nightingale shouted for the prince to fetch Nana. As Nana worked on Wendy's injuries, Roland tried to understand what had happened. He feared the association had been wiped out by demons, and only 3 had survived. Lightning appeared from the infirmary, reassuring him that she wasn't hurt. She admitted she hadn't believed Nightingale's claims about the prince at first, but now she knew he truly cared about witches. She joked that the world was full of weird people, so a weird prince wasn't the strangest thing she'd seen. Roland didn't appreciate the comment, but let it slide. At least he now knew the association hadn't been attacked. Lightning explained everything, how Wendy had been wounded by their own teacher Kara, and how they ended up fleeing. Later that night, Roland returned to his room and nearly jumped out of his skin. Nightingale was lying on his bed in her nightclothes. He immediately panicked, wondering if she was planning something intimate, but she got up and walked toward him, her expression serious. He backed nervously into the door, insisting she needed rest. Instead, Nightingale, Veronica Gillen, knelt before him. She formally swore her loyalty. She vowed to follow his commands, stand at his side in battle, and face demons or any danger until her final breath. Roland wasn't shocked. After being betrayed and disillusioned by the association, it was clear she was turning to him and placing her future and the future of witches in his hands. Without hesitation, he took the sword from her and officially appointed Nightingale as his right-hand woman. The prince asked Nightingale if her real name was Veronica, and she nodded, saying there was no need to hide it from him anymore. We then caught up with Wendy, who had just been offered a contract. Roland told her she could stay in Bordertown and work for him. If she agreed, she could sign on the dotted line. He promised fair pay for her magic. He also revealed he'd discovered a possible method for witches to pass through maturity without feeling any pain. The idea shocked the new witches. Outside, Roland admitted it was just his theory. He explained that witches were vessels for magic, and as they grew older, their magic accumulated until it overflowed during maturity, wreaking havoc on their bodies. He pointed to Anna as an example of someone who survived that transition. He dismissed the church's belief about demonic possession as nonsense. Instead, he proposed that witches could ease their pain by continuously releasing magic, which would prevent dangerous buildup. He promised that Bordertown would become a safe haven where witches could openly practice their magic without fear or discrimination. If everything worked out, he believed they could build their own version of the Holy Mountain right here in the Borderlands. Wendy, already convinced, asked where to begin. Roland told her to keep using her magic mastery would come with practice. While Roland got busy training the newcomers, Nana and Anna had a quiet conversation. Nana admired Wendy's wind magic and lightning's flying, which had helped save Wendy's life. Anna was thrilled to have more sisters around, but Nana teased her, pointing out how warmly Nightingale seemed to look at Roland. Anna didn't get what she meant, but Nana warned her that if she didn't make a move soon, Nightingale just might win the prince over. Suddenly an alarm blared. Something was wrong. A report came in. A demon monster had appeared. Roland rushed to the wall, joining the soldiers. He strained to see the creature, but nothing was visible at first. He wondered if it was a false alarm, but the hunter who raised it insisted he look closer. As the mist thickened, a dark, shifting blob came into view. When Roland focused, he froze. It was a hybrid monster. The hunter revealed it was the same one that nearly killed him years ago. Roland pieced together the truth. This creature was no ordinary beast. It had intelligence. It retreated when endangered. It survived for years. It learned. When the beast reached the wall, it halted. Everyone grew tense. Without warning, the monster launched into the air. Roland shouted for his soldiers to attack, but the creature was already airborne. It landed directly on the wall above him, smashing into its weakest point. That confirmed his suspicions. This monster was thinking. Once it breached the wall, soldiers reported it was heading toward town. Roland ordered his 2nd Civilian Division to follow him, while the backup division held the line. He marched toward the town, regretting he had underestimated the creature's cunning. When they finally reached the site, they were greeted with horrifying news. The monster had already devoured someone. A trail of blood snaked across the ground, sending a chill down Roland's spine, but he forced down his fear and commanded everyone to stay sharp. Moments later, the monster emerged again, snatching another civilian. Soldiers hesitated. They couldn't fire without risking innocent lives. Iron Axe quickly ordered them to take higher positions. Soldiers scrambled up rooftops, aiming from above. They fired, their shots grazing the monster's oversized skull but missing the vital point. The creature turned, glaring furiously. Before it could attack, Iron Axe rushed in and fired at point-blank range, blowing its head apart. He finally avenged the innocent lives the creature had taken. Meanwhile, far to the north near the Hermes perimeter outside Grey Castle, another threat loomed. A colossal, mutated creature crawled toward the towering defensive wall. The knights atop the wall trembled as it approached. When it finally climbed onto the rooftop, it drooled heavily, its eyes lighting up at the sight of the humans nearby. Without warning, the monster opened its enormous jaws, unleashing an entire army of creatures pouring out of its belly. The soldiers realized they were trapped. With nowhere to run, they broke into a desperate sprint, fleeing in the opposite direction as the horde surged forward. A creature soared overhead, shadowing the fleeing soldiers as they raced toward the inner city's north wall. When they finally reached the gate, they had no choice but to wait for it to open. The young woman with them revealed that the entire outer city had already fallen to the monsters. Their objective now was to defend the church, but with only a handful of soldiers and an army of hybrids at their heels, it looked like a hopeless task. Then the girl pulled out a red pill and ordered the soldiers to take it and destroy the enemy without hesitation. They obeyed. As soon as they swallowed the pill, a powerful surge shot through their bodies, filling them with strength. They marched forward, ready to fight to the death. But before these reckless soldiers threw themselves into certain doom, the gate finally slammed open. A cocky figure strode out, announcing himself as part of the Judgment Army. Fully armored knights followed behind him, their heavy plate gleaming like they were elite warriors straight out of legend. The woman stared in disbelief. She had no idea who these so-called Judgment soldiers were, and she doubted mere humans could stand against hybrid monsters. But she was about to get her answer. As the monster and the Judgment Army clashed, the flying beast swooped down. One knight grabbed its enormous claws mid-air, while another took his stance and hurled a spear with godlike speed. The spear pierced straight through the creature's skull. The woman was stunned. Their speed and strength rivaled the hybrids themselves. As these terrifyingly powerful knights tore through the monsters, the scene shifted to a church spire, where 3 archbishops watched the battle using a telescope. They were pleased to see the monsters falling. Archbishop Ton noted that the worst part of the fight had already passed. The reinforcements sent by the 4 great kingdoms had been completely annihilated. Archbishop Heather chuckled, mocking the kingdoms for sending thousands of soldiers who became nothing more than cannon fodder. To her, this proved that the kingdom's forces could never compare to the church's mighty Judgment Army. A 3rd archbishop interjected, however, reminding them of the cost. Many Judgment soldiers had died, and they had used a massive number of the red pills, the same pills that formed the core of the church's military strength. Tun gritted his teeth. He insisted they had no choice. The beasts of the wasteland had risen exactly as foretold in scripture. He warned that unless the continent unified, complete destruction awaited them. Heather scoffed, arguing that humans were just as monstrous as demons, so wiping them out might not be such a loss. Her irreverence enraged the old archbishop, who snapped at her to stop her blasphemy and defiance of God's will. Heather simply shrugged, pointing out that God never promised humanity's survival. She even questioned whether God cared more about humans than demons. The old man bristled but stayed silent, perhaps because her words struck too close to the truth. Even Archbishop Maine, though quiet, privately agreed with her, but he also believed the only ones God favored were the victors. Back in Bordertown, they laid the fallen soldier to rest. Roland gathered everyone and announced they were there to honor Mr. Aggie of the 2nd Civilian Division. He spoke of the man's bravery and sacrifice in protecting their home before giving him a final farewell. The soldiers covered the grave with earth. Chief Knight Carter was deeply moved. He had never seen someone of noble birth honor a commoner so sincerely, especially one whose name he hadn't even known. Roland explained that it felt right. Bordertown had never held proper funerals for those killed by monsters. They deserved more than unmarked graves. Funerals, he said, were not only about decency, they strengthened morale. When people remembered what they were fighting for, their resolve grew stronger. He wanted to ignite that resolve. As they talked, the fallen soldier's wife appeared with her 2 children. The men wondered how she would survive now, but a bald soldier reassured them she would receive her husband's wages, extra compensation and essentials. While they spoke, Vice Captain Vanner suddenly sensed something nearby. When the bald man asked what was wrong, Vanner said he felt a presence, but dismissed it as his imagination. Back at the cement-making cottage, Roland checked in with Anna about the progress on the blunderbuss barrels. Anna sweetly explained that thanks to the new steam-powered boring machine, the blacksmiths could handle the heavy work. Meanwhile, lightning bounced around the forge like a hyperactive spark, bombarding the blacksmiths with non-stop questions about everything she saw. They could barely keep up. Roland had been wondering why he hadn't seen her around lately. Now he understood. And judging from her excitement, he already had another project in mind for her. Roland showed Anna a rough sketch of a 12-pound gun, a massive weapon he planned for their sweet Nana to use one day. He dove into the technical details of how the weapon functioned, but everything he said went completely over Anna's head. Then he instructed her to use 2 holes in the ground as molds to cast cannonball dies. Anna got straight to work, pouring molten metal into the molds. Roland warned her not to look directly at the glowing hot metal. She immediately squeezed her eyes shut, which made Roland blush. He stepped forward to wipe the sweat from her face. It was hilarious. Despite the freezing temperature, both of them were sweating. The knight nearby clearly saw that this was more than just a prince wiping sweat from a worker. Roland's red face made it obvious, and Anna was blushing too. Meanwhile, someone else was watching. A man stood hidden nearby, horrified by what he was witnessing. The 4th Prince of Greycastle, openly sheltering witches. He sprinted away, determined to report everything to the new king. This was the presence Vanner had sensed earlier. A spy sent by Timothy. The man couldn't wrap his head around what he had seen. Witches treated like normal citizens. A giant wall that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Metal sticks used to shoot demons. It was all so bizarre he almost believed the town was cursed. If the pay hadn't been so high, he would have never agreed to spy on this nightmare of a place. Too bad for him. He was terrible at spying. In the background, Vanner spotted him immediately and shouted for him to halt. Word spread like wildfire. They had caught a spy. The terrified man had no idea what to do as angry townsfolk swarmed around him. All he could think was that the 4th prince must be dabbling in devil magic. Inside the castle, Roland's consultant was tearing his hair out again. The prince's newest demand? Buy 2 boats, but don't hire captains or crews. How am I supposed to sail them? The old man yelled, completely exhausted from Roland's impossible orders that somehow always worked out. A knock interrupted his despair. A soldier announced they had caught a rat. Cole, also known as Groundhog, a spy sent by Prince Timothy. He had lived under a fake identity for months. They found money and letters on him, and he was now being interrogated. The consultant coldly ordered them to extract every drop of information and then execute him. This wasn't even the first spy. They had caught 4 already. Roland had anticipated more spies would come. He instructed the consultant to spread a rumor that someone was trying to sabotage the food reserves and offered rewards for turning in suspicious individuals. The consultant was endlessly amazed. In his eyes, Roland was a brilliant devil, fearless even of the Stone of Divine Judgment. Back in the Greycastle capital, Timothy asked about the responses to his decrees. None had replied. His advisor reported that the 4th Prince, Roland, sent a message saying he would return once the months of demons ended and his people were safe. Worse, Roland still referred to Timothy as prince, not king. Timothy scoffed, labeling Roland a fool for rejecting his generosity. He had intended to offer Roland land and comfort. Instead, Roland insisted on opposing him. Timothy asked about the 3rd and 5th princesses. His lackey reported the 3rd princess was missing, gone with her butler and servants. Timothy face-palmed. Despite their differences, he didn't want commoners harming his sister. He then asked about Garcia Wimbledon, the stubborn pirate. Before the advisor could answer, a knight stormed in with breaking news. Garcia had defeated Duke Joseph's forces at the southern border and seized control of Hawk City. The revelation horrified Timothy. It worsened when the knight added that Garcia had crowned herself Queen of Clearwater, backed by the local dukes, and the entire southern half of Greycastle had split away. Down by the river south of Bordertown, two exhausted captains were dismantling the giant cannon they had just assembled. Both men complained bitterly. It was insanely heavy. The chief knight wondered aloud why he was stuck guarding such a monstrosity. No one could move it, let alone steal it. Roland sighed and explained that this wasn't just a weapon. It was a masterpiece forged from blood, sweat, and steel. He couldn't understand why no one else appreciated its beauty. Lightning, on the other hand, was thrilled. She eagerly asked to clean the barrel, and Roland gave her permission. She practically skipped toward it, happy as ever. The knight looked confused and asked why Lightning hadn't signed a labor contract like the other witches. Roland explained that she insisted on working for free, so long as he kept inventing interesting things. Food and clothes were all she needed. For a broke prince, that was too good a deal to refuse. After Lightning finished cleaning the cannon barrel and proudly reported it was empty, she bounced in place, eager for the next step. Roland reminded the soldiers of the basics: always check the barrel first to ensure nothing was stuck inside. Next came the gunpowder, packed tightly, followed by the cannonball pushed down firmly to eliminate air gaps. Finally, they inserted the fuse. Once everything was set, the prince ordered everyone to clear out. He lit the fuse himself. It crackled to life, and the soldiers quickly covered their ears. Boom! The cannonball blasted forward, tearing straight through the dummy target and punching a clean hole through its chest. The hunter muttered a prayer at the sheer destructive power. Vanner was speechless. Even after smashing the dummy, the cannonball traveled another 100 meters. A 12-pound cannon could theoretically shoot several kilometers, so for a first test, this was more than promising. The knight acknowledged the weapon's power but worried about its weight and the hassle of moving it, loading it, and transporting cannonballs and powder. Roland agreed but insisted it was worth it if it allowed them to slay hybrid demons effortlessly. He already had ideas to solve the weight problem, like mounting cannons on ships. He'd even asked the consultant to acquire sailboats from Willowtown. Wendy's wind control ability would boost travel speeds for civilians and weaponry, making it easier to launch a surprise attack on Duke Ryan's army from behind. But the consultant shattered Roland's dream. Willowtown's ships were far too expensive. A double-masted sailboat cost 120 gold royals, not including the 200 royal cost for the crew. Even if they emptied their entire treasury of 3,155 gold, they'd only afford boats, nothing left to pay the civilian army. Back in the office, Roland argued with the old man again, insisting he didn't need crews. The consultant refused, saying Willowtown didn't sell boats without them. Roland suggested buying ships from other ports, but the old man shot that down too. Every major port was too far, and transporting boats inland would cost a fortune. Then Roland's eyes lit up. Why not build their own boat? They didn't need a fancy ship, just something that floated. Wendy could handle the steering. A simple flat-bottomed barge would be enough. But the old man raised another concern. Materials. Roland confidently suggested light wood, until he realized a log raft wouldn't survive heavy loads. He even considered having Anna weld a full metal boat, but they lacked the steel after producing guns and cannons. Then inspiration struck. They still had plenty of leftover concrete from building the wall. He proposed a wooden base reinforced with steel rebar and a concrete hull. It was ridiculous, but so were most of Roland's great ideas. With that, he marched off to draft the blueprint. Before long, they were down by the river at a makeshift boat workshop. The basic structure was already assembled. Lightning stared at the giant shape and joked that it looked like a massive bathtub fit for a king. Roland laughed and explained it was a boat, not a tub, but Lightning remained doubtful. It didn't look like any boat she'd ever seen. As they bantered, Wendy smiled, happy to see Lightning and Roland getting along. Nightingale pointed out that Lightning had always been like this, energetic, friendly, and easy to bond with. But the mention of the association darkened Wendy's expression. She couldn't help worrying about the sisters they had left behind. The scene then shifted to the mountain range, where the remaining witches marched downhill. One sister warned that demons were nearby. The teacher ordered Leaf to lay her down and help the others. Leaf gently placed the injured teacher on the ground as monstrous shadows emerged. The witches stepped forward to confront them. Meanwhile, the teacher seethed with resentment. She blamed Nightingale for their current suffering and vowed to get revenge once she found the holy mountain and gathered more witches. She wasn't done with Wendy and Lightning either. She saw them as traitors. When the monsters leaped toward them, Leaf summoned her magic. Roots burst from the ground, ensnaring the beasts. Zephyr sucked the air from their lungs, suffocating them. Seeing her students overpower the monsters brought a fierce smile to the teacher's face. With witches like these, she was certain they would topple the church once they reached the holy mountain. The teacher decided they should rest for a moment, but she suddenly froze in shock at the sight before her. Towering structures rose in the distance, skyscraper-like shapes so massive and unnatural that no human could possibly have built them. Her eyes widened, and she whispered in disbelief, wondering if they had finally reached the holy mountain. A radiant smile spread across her face. To her, this was it, the sacred place they had been chasing all their lives. But the other witches were far less convinced. According to every book they'd ever studied, the holy mountain was supposed to be serene, peaceful, and overflowing with life. What lay before them now looked nothing like that. An eerie, desolate landscape dominated by colossal monoliths. Leaf, still uncertain, tried to speak, but the teacher was already losing herself in excitement. She insisted these towering shapes were proof they had found the holy mountain at last. Leaf hesitated to argue, remembering what the teacher did to Nightingale for disagreeing. She knew opposing her again could be dangerous. With no other choice, Leaf reluctantly began walking forward. She realized that unless they explored, the teacher would never let them rest. As they advanced across the strange terrain, one of the witches suddenly collapsed, dead before she even hit the ground. Shock rippled through the group. Leaf knelt beside her fallen sister, wanting to mourn, but the teacher snapped at her sharply. She ordered Leaf to keep moving, warning them that stopping even for a second could mean death for all of them. Fearful and grieving, Leaf stood and pressed forward, the surviving witches following her toward the unknown. At nightfall, Leaf breaks down in tears, torn between grief and the teacher's urgent commands. The teacher insists that staying here any longer will only invite demon attacks, so they push forward. But soon another witch realizes the mountain they had been heading toward has completely vanished. The sight shocks the teacher, who, let's be honest, behaves more like a tyrant than a caring leader. She sinks into despair, recalling a city that appears like an unreachable illusion in the sky, fading every time the sun sets. The Snake Woman declares that what they saw was nothing but an illusion, something she has heard rumors about, usually seen over open seas, never on land. Before they can process this revelation, something begins to approach. Another witch confirms it. 3 demons are heading their way, but it soon becomes clear that this new threat is far from ordinary. A mysterious entity launches a weapon at one of the witches, striking her down instantly. A long spear pierces her chest, leaving Leaf frozen in terror. When Leaf looks toward the direction it came from, she sees hybrid creatures riding demonic beasts. With bodies twisted beyond recognition, it is no surprise they felled a witch with a single blow. One witch quickly unleashes her power, turning the ground into a swamp, but the creatures leap off their mounts with unnatural ease and land directly in front of the women. One monster swings its massive hand and smashes a witch with brutal force, blood splattering across the ground. The survivors are left trembling, petrified. Another monster fixes its gaze on a redhead among them. Her face drains of color as the grotesque tongue-like appendage dangles from its jaws, looking nothing like a normal tongue. Before it can reach her, a fireball slams into its body. The attack does little more than irritate the creature, but it buys the women a moment. The redhead grabs the hand of the traumatized orange-haired witch, trying to pull her to safety, but the terrified girl cannot even remember how to move. Another witch attempts to stand her ground, pulling out her tiny bow, a weapon that looks more like a toy. The monster retaliates with a savage kick to her chest, sending her flying. She crashes lifelessly to the ground, likely killed instantly. Despite watching her friends fall like insects, Wendy calls upon her root magic again. Vines erupt and wrap around one of the monsters from head to toe. The Snake Woman's summoned serpent coils around it as well, and together they manage to force the monstrous creature to its knees. Wendy shouts for the others to run while she holds the creature in place. Meanwhile, the second monster retrieves a spear from its back. As it prepares to throw, its feet sink slightly into the swampy ground, but still it hurls the weapon with incredible speed, leaving a trail of pink light as it hurtles forward. The impact is so intense that the target is briefly lost in a haze. Miraculously, Wendy narrowly dodges the attack. Suddenly, the remaining monster unleashes a surge of electricity, zapping everyone within range. When the crackling light fades, only Wendy and the arrogant Snake Woman remain conscious. Wendy refuses to accept how quickly their world has fallen apart. As the monster advances toward the Snake Woman, it extends its massive hand and grabs her effortlessly. Dangling in the air, she unleashes her poisonous serpents. One snake bites into the strange tongue-like appendage protruding from the monster's mouth. The moment its fangs sink in, a red fog begins leaking from the appendage. The enraged monster grabs the snakes and crushes them in its bare hands. Tears fill the teacher's eyes while Wendy watches helplessly. The demon abruptly drops the Snake Woman as it begins choking, its movements faltering. Honestly, the Snake Witch had been insufferable from the moment she appeared, but even this is a brutal sight. The creature's legs buckle, and it collapses. The red mist drains completely from the container on its back, and the giant beast falls lifeless to the ground. Wendy begins piecing things together. She turns to the remaining monster thrashing helplessly in the swamp. she spots the same strange appendage and takes a desperate gamble. Running to her fallen sister, she grabs the crossbow. Determination hardens her expression. She aims directly for the creature's weak point and fires, shouting with all her remaining strength. When the arrow hits, red mist gushes out, confirming her hunch. The monster's body slumps in defeat. Wendy drops the bow and falls to her knees, surrounded by the lifeless bodies of her sisters. Tears stream down her face as her sobs echo through the devastated clearing. Meanwhile, back at the hospital in Bordertown, it appears Nana has reached the moment of magical maturity. She lies in bed, frightened, asking whether she is going to die. The prince and the others immediately reassure her, explaining that because she has been releasing her magic daily, it will not turn against her. Wendy gently pats her hand and supports the prince's words. Nana's anxious father moves closer, telling her to squeeze his hand if the pain becomes too much. The others join in, trying to lighten the mood with coin tricks and storytelling. Their cheerful chatter helps lift Nana's fears as the moment of transformation approaches. Anna steps forward next, gently reminding Nana that everyone is right beside her. She kisses her forehead with the tenderness of an older sister. As midnight approaches, the group remains gathered around Nana's bed, patiently waiting for her moment of maturity. Lightning, true to her nature, is the only one who doesn't look bored. The prince, however, looks like he might collapse at any moment, yawning uncontrollably. Just watching Lightning's boundless energy is enough to exhaust him. He turns to Nightingale and quietly asks if she has sensed any magical fluctuations in Nana's body. Nightingale shakes her head, admitting that the wait has been long and nothing unusual has occurred yet. The prince gives himself a sharp slap on the cheeks to stay awake and mutters that once the months of demons are behind them, he wants to build a clock tower so they won't have to pass time in such tedious uncertainty ever again. Suddenly, Nightingale hears a rooster crowing. The prince pulls aside the curtain and is blinded momentarily by the morning light. Anna startles awake as sunlight floods the room. It becomes clear that the next day has officially begun, and to everyone's delight, Nana awakens. Lightning bursts with joy. Nana's father breaks into tears, and the entire group lets out a collective sigh of relief. Nana has passed safely through her maturity without any complications. After the excitement settles, the prince leans toward Nightingale and quietly asks if she is absolutely certain today is the correct day for Nana's maturity. Nightingale nods. The change was subtle, she explains, but unmistakable. She agrees with the prince's theory. Daily magic practice strengthens witches and eases the dangers of their growth. If witches receive proper training each day, reaching adulthood would no longer be a life-threatening ordeal. Wendy joins in, pointing out that since the prince is the only ruler welcoming witches, Bordertown could become a sanctuary for them. She pledges her full support. The prince brightens immediately, admitting he has been contemplating this for a long time. Still, openly inviting witches would provoke backlash from the kingdom. His plan is to quietly spread rumors of a haven, allowing witches to find their way here on their own. But if he one day becomes king, no one would be able to stop him from officially offering them protection. Wendy drops to her knees, promising to help him become king. She swears her loyalty and declares her life his from now on. The next day, the prince's sailship finally reaches shore. Two soldiers inspect it closely, pointing out all sorts of technical oddities that make this boat unlike anything they've ever seen. Once they finish, they head back to cannon training. Meanwhile, a group of daydreaming soldiers following Vice Captain Vanner start chatting loudly about their desire to become as formidable as Hunter Ironaxe. But one of them grows serious, complaining that they've been training endlessly without ever firing a real shot, and wonders when the prince will finally send them into actual combat. Another mentions how the Flintlock team has already begun practicing battle tactics atop the walls. This gets Vanner thinking, could it be that the prince intends to use the cannon team against demonic beasts? But considering the cannon's weight and bulk, hauling it onto the walls seems impractical. Suddenly it clicks. Their commander's true strategy is to use the cannon aboard the sailing boat, not just against beasts, but potentially against enemy forces on the western shore of Redwater River. Back in Bordertown, the cannon team is undergoing intense training under Hunter Ironaxe. Their task: aim the cannon precisely in a designated direction. The chief knight notices their determination, and the prince agrees, explaining that both teams are pushing themselves hard because 5 silver coins are on the line. The reward fuels their ambition. The prince announces that once ground training is complete, operations will shift to Littletown. The knight asks whether he means the concrete ship they built, and the prince nods. Yes, that is exactly what he means. Workers had made quick progress during the lighter snowfall. They finished the anti-rust treatment, built a storage shed for cannonballs, and even set up a platform for Wendy to practice using her wind powers to maneuver the boat. The chief knight finally understands why the prince has been so insistent on training Wendy, but then the prince drops a bombshell. He appoints the chief knight as the ship's commander. The knight panics, protesting that he has never sailed a day in his life. The prince merely shrugs and tells him not to worry. The witches will be the ones operating most of the vessel anyway. When the soldiers finally fire a cannonball, The explosion echoes across the training ground. The prince can't help feeling smug. With the shattered glass bottle marking their first successful shot, Lightning eagerly inaugurates their upcoming voyage. The boat is ready, the crew is assembled, and she proudly takes her position as Littletown's navigator, setting the stage for the next chapter of their journey. Meanwhile, Taigu Pine, ever the overprotective father, takes charge of communications. The knight, reluctantly forced into the role of captain, looks anything but thrilled. Lightning pats him on the shoulder and assures him that navigating the ship is no problem for her. After all, she's a seasoned adventurer at sea. She even brings up her father, Thunderbolt, who was also a natural sailor. As she explores the ship, Lightning is astonished by the strange materials it is built from. Unlike anything she has ever seen, the chief knight is pleased that the weather is perfect for their test voyage of Littletown, a deliberate choice by the prince. Once the boat hits the water, everything goes surprisingly smoothly. Brian has been assigned as helmsman. Lightning tells Brian to turn the rudder fully to the right, and the knight echoes the command word for word. Curious, Lightning asks why he keeps repeating her. He explains he is simply following the prince's instructions. Brian, however, seems utterly confused by what he is supposed to do. Lightning face palms, then takes over herself, grabbing the rudder and spinning it sharply to the left. Both men nearly fall over in panic. After her fun, Lightning marvels at how much detail the prince built into the ship, even details that seasoned sailors like herself might overlook. She then calls to Wendy, reminding her to start generating wind, since she has officially been assigned as the ship's movement power support. Before arriving in Bordertown, Wendy had barely trained her magic. Early attempts were so weak she could only blow dry small pieces of meat, but thanks to the prince's guidance and the intense practice she endured, her magic has matured. Now she channels her power and gives the boat a mighty push, sending it gliding across the water with ease. Lightning and the knight cheer, amazed at the boat's momentum. Pine, meanwhile, drifts into philosophical awe. He mutters that the prince has turned rocks into boats and made them float, and at this point he's starting to believe there is nothing the prince cannot accomplish. As the ship sails smoothly, the chief knight even compliments Brian for becoming a sailor in less than half an hour. Brian shyly credits Lightning for guiding him so well. But on the pedestal, Wendy begins to waver. Her energy drains rapidly and she struggles to keep generating wind. She tries to push through it, determined to last until they reach shore, but instead she collapses, losing consciousness. Lightning immediately orders the crew to steer toward shore. When they get Wendy down, they discover her entire body covered in icy sweat, dangerously close to freezing. They scold her for not warning them sooner. At the same time, their luck turns again. The boat crashes against rocks, damaging the hull. The captain issues urgent orders. Lightning must take Wendy back to the castle immediately, while the others stay behind to gather the sails. As Lightning departs with Wendy in her arms, the captain stares sadly at the damaged ship. Their test run of Littletown wasn't a failure, but it wasn't a success either. At least two major flaws are now clear. Wendy needs to be kept warm on the pedestal, and the ship desperately needs shockproofing. Meanwhile, far from Bordertown, a lonely carriage rattles down a desolate road. The driver is a one-legged man. Inside the carriage, a priest savagely beats a young girl. She is not alone. Several girls are packed inside with her. The carriage driver can't help feeling sorry for them. Still, he believes the priest is their savior. Without him, these children would have frozen to death on the streets. When the priest steps out, the driver asks if the girls are orphans from Wolfart Kingdom. The priest nods, explaining that churches often take in children when food and clothing grow scarce. With so many mouths to feed, the church welcomes any help, and the driver's reliability is appreciated. The driver is grateful for the job too. 20 silvers to ferry orphans is a fortune, especially for a man with one leg. Driving suits him perfectly. What he doesn't know is that these girls are not ordinary orphans. They are witches. That is why the priest pays him so generously. But the priest keeps this hidden, urging the driver not to ask questions, and promising more money upon arrival. At a roadside hotel, the priest casually tells a woman he has brought her some tender kids to take care of. The driver watches, horrified, as the priest handles the girls like livestock. Unable to stomach the sight, he closes the curtains. The scene shifts. Archbishop Maine descends into a vast underground chamber. Once again he stops to absorb its magnificence. No matter how many times he visits, the grandeur of the enormous stone dome leaves him breathless. He gazes upward and declares that this dome, this colossal, ancient structure, is surely a natural creation crafted by the Lord himself. The archbishop explains that while the Hermes Church above ground symbolizes steadfastness, the heavily guarded depths beneath it may be the institution's true heart. Once he enters the restricted underground complex, a knight guides him deeper. As they walk, we learn that these knights are the church's most loyal hounds, rewarded with living quarters inside these tunnels. Any misconduct is dealt with harshly, often resulting in lifelong confinement within the very dungeons they guard. Other tunnels house libraries filled with church literature, historical documents, and more grimly, the prison where criminals spend the rest of their days. Through another heavy door, they enter the prison itself. Desperate voices echo throughout, prisoners begging for freedom and offering anything in return. The priest stops before a particular cell secured with a massive lock. He orders the knight to wait outside. Once alone, he urges the man inside to eat properly, reminding him that these meals are among the best available, aside from alcohol, of course. The prisoner is revealed to be none other than King Wimbledon. He bitterly asks if the priest even has anything to eat in a place like this. He laments 6 months of isolation with no news of his children. The priest hesitates, but under the kingcept's pressure finally reveals the grim truth. Gerald Wimbledon, the king's first son, was executed on Timothy's orders for attempted regicide. Garcia Wimbledon, the third child, has proclaimed herself Queen of Clearwater, preparing for inevitable war with Timothy. As for the fifth princess, and our hero, they are alive. But nothing major has changed. The king is devastated. He demands to know why the priest waited so long to imprison him. Then he reveals what he already knows. The priest used a witch to create a body double in order to frame and eliminate his first son. He acknowledges the church's rising influence, but demands an explanation for why they are forcing his beloved children into a brutal struggle for the throne. The priest responds calmly. His children are adults. They act of their own accord. Garcia seized Clearwater Port 5 years ago, and would not sit idle while her brothers fought. The church, he continues, cannot afford delays. To tighten their grip on the kingdom, removing King Wimbledon was necessary. He then outlines something even more alarming. The 4 major nations Dawn, Wolfheart, Everwinter and Greycastle will soon cease to exist. The entire continent will be united under the church's rule. The king collapses to his knees, blood dribbling from his mouth. With his remaining strength he snarls that he'll be waiting for the priest in hell. Unfazed, the priest brushes it off as irrelevant. Everything is part of the church's grand design. Moments later the king dies, almost certainly poisoned. The priest sees the king's death as a pivotal moment. Now they can focus on their true enemy, the demons threatening humanity's survival. Back in the mountains, the Witches' Association mourns the sisters who died failing their maturity trials. Anxiety looms. Their food is dwindling, and the scouting group searching for the Holy Mountain hasn't returned in 2 weeks. Suddenly, footsteps echo through the tunnels. Lady Leaf appears, exhausted, staggering and finally collapsing face first onto the floor. Rewinding a bit, we see Leaf wandering alone through a desolate landscape. Her face is pale, hunger gnawing at her body. Her maturity suddenly hits in the middle of her journey, and before she can recover, a monstrous figure looms behind her. She cries for help, and awakens with a gasp. It was only a nightmare. She had been unconscious for 2 days. Hummingbird informs her of this as the other witches gather around. One apologizes for dumping serious news on her immediately, but the discussion is unavoidable. If Kara doesn't return, Leaf must take over as teacher. Their association is on the brink of collapse. Without hesitation, Lady Leaf announces she will go to find Nightingale. The camp falls silent. Nightingale's story about Bordertown seems impossible to believe. Could witches really find safety there? Leaf reassures them. She will go alone to confirm whether Bordertown truly is the sanctuary Nightingale described. She instructs the purple-haired witch to take leadership if she does not return. If Nightingale's information is real, Bordertown might replace the Holy Mountain entirely, giving them a genuine home at last. Meanwhile, in Bordertown, another battle erupts. A monster vaults over the wall, and Vanner drives his spear into its belly. But when he tries to lift it, the weapon snaps clean in half, and the creature crashes to the ground. He quickly orders the musketeers to fire, and they respond instantly, cutting the monsters down. A soldier hands Vanner a new spear. He's surprised to see a young boy, Claw, among them. Claw simply says he goes wherever he's needed. As the corpses of the monsters lie scattered, Vanner reflects aloud. Individually, these creatures aren't much of a threat, but they must never grow complacent. Still, he's thrilled. Ever since the prince took command of Bordertown, they've been able to repel these terrifying enemies. Before, only Longsong Fortress could manage such feats. Now even common townspeople can fight back, thanks to the prince. Vanner notes that the prince is always there on the front lines, standing side by side with ordinary soldiers whenever danger draws near. Bordertown, once fragile and forgotten, has become something extraordinary, and the true battle for its future is only just beginning. A hybrid monster suddenly appears. A winged lion, and a soldier immediately identifies it. Lightning eagerly volunteers to take it on, but the prince stops her from charging in recklessly. They have a plan. Lightning will act as bait, keeping the demon's attention while maintaining a safe height. The monster lands on the wall, and Lightning, full of confidence, assures everyone she won't disappoint. The prince officially initiates the hunt, but Lightning's confidence wavers for a moment when she blurts out that the prince's fierce battle cry sounded more like a whimpering dog. The ladies look at him and hesitantly agree. Before he can react, Lightning vanishes, leaving him baffled and slightly offended. He reminds the witches to stick to the plan. They nod with amused smiles. Up in the sky, Everything is unfolding exactly as he hoped. The winged lion grows increasingly irritated as lightning pummels it with pebbles, darting around it like an annoying sparrow. She taunts it relentlessly, treating the deadly creature as if it were a playful cat. It roars and slams its claws into the ground, but Lightning stays just out of reach, clearly enjoying herself. Meanwhile, Nightingale rushes through her hidden dimension. Lightning has successfully lured the lion into town square, the kill zone. Nightingale warns Anna that even inside her fog-like dimension, the monster can still sense them. Anna must approach cautiously. Her flames have a 5-meter radius, and they only get one clean shot, no mistakes. Lightning continues her reckless game of tag, keeping the lion's focus. When the women spot their chance, Nightingale pulls them out of her dimension, and Anna unleashes her green fire at point-blank range. The flames are so intense that even Nightingale, standing at a distance, feels the heat. Lightning cheers, bragging that her fire could melt steel, so roasting a monster is nothing. The winged lion collapses and disintegrates into ash. The prince notes with satisfaction that Anna didn't even need backup. Then something strange happens. The remaining monsters begin to retreat. Confusion ripples through the defenders. Demons never retreat without reason. The prince looks up, stunned. The dark, oppressive clouds above are breaking apart, sunlight tearing through them. The months of demons have ended. Word spreads quickly. Cheers erupt from every corner of Border Town. The prince gathers everyone for a speech as soldiers and townsfolk roar with excitement. They shout proudly that no one starved this winter under his rule. He praises their bravery and resilience. Border Town survived the darkest season with minimal losses, thanks to their civilian army, something unimaginable back when Longsong Fortress threatened them with hunger and cold. Today, Border Town stands strong on its own. The crowd cheers wildly. The prince grins and declares a massive celebration, a victory parade with honey-glazed beef, for anyone who joins the town square dance. When the festivities begin, the chief knight carries out a giant slab of beef, and Hunter Ironaxe fires up the grill. Flames roar, the scent of sizzling meat fills the air, and villagers leap into a lively circle dance. Hunter shouts the rules: those who dance get meat, and the longer they dance, the more they earn. People rush in, dragging friends along. No dancing means no beef. The chief knight worries about giving away too much of their limited meat supply, but the prince, though disappointed, decides the people deserve this joy. They survived the months of demons peacefully for the first time in their history. Tonight will be remembered for years. Meanwhile, the prince hurries back to the castle for a private feast with the witches. They have been waiting eagerly. Lightning immediately announces the start of the banquet. Anna uses her flames to roast sweet chicken to golden perfection, making Nana nearly drool at the aroma. Nightingale elegantly slices the meat into delicate, even pieces. The long winter has ended, and for the prince and his witches, the real celebration is just beginning. Meanwhile, Lightning and Nana are having the time of their lives. An outdoor barbecue party is pretty much the greatest thing they could imagine, and our hero is enjoying himself just as much, especially seeing how happy everyone is. He believes these women, with their incredible abilities, deserve nothing less than this kind of luxury. Then, out of nowhere, Lightning leans in and plants a big kiss right on his face. Nightingale and Anna freeze in shock. Even the prince is left stunned, blinking in disbelief. When questioned about the sudden kiss, Lightning casually explains that during celebrations, it's perfectly acceptable for women to kiss the territory's ruler. It's simply tradition. Nightingale feels herself bristle with jealousy, while Wendy quietly notices the tension bubbling beneath the smiles. Anna looks unusually downcast, clearly wishing she'd had the courage to make her own move. As midnight arrives, the prince, tipsy from drinking, starts feeling dizzy. Suddenly he spots Anna standing alone nearby. She walks toward him, cheeks flushed, and he blushes instantly. He stammers an explanation that Lightning's kiss was an accident. Anna nods softly. He adds that Lightning is very young and that he doesn't see her romantically. Gathering her courage, she steps closer. Inches from him, she whispers that she waited until they were alone because she isn't as bold as Lightning. Then she gently kisses him on the cheek. Upstairs, Wendy sits curled up with a book, lost in confusion. She's baffled that books about the church's origins don't mention any gods, just a long line of popes. It doesn't make sense. While she's still puzzling over it, Nightingale walks in, startling her. Wendy snaps the book shut, happy to see her friend. She casually mentions how Lightning fell asleep while calling for Daddy like a child, which makes Nightingale laugh. She also warns Wendy not to strain her eyes reading in dim light. But Wendy suddenly hits her with a question that catches her completely off guard. Is Nightingale upset about Lightning's kiss? Nightingale blushes bright red and denies everything. Wendy doesn't buy it and pushes gently until Nightingale grits her teeth and admits, yes, the kiss is bothering her. Wendy tries to soothe her. Roland Wimbledon is the fourth prince. Their mission is to help him seize the throne and become king of Greycastle. As witches, they'll be protected under his rule. Eventually, though, he will need to marry a princess or a noblewoman to secure an heir. Witches, Wendy reminds her, cannot have children. It's the price of their powers. She hopes Nightingale understands the implication. Outside, after the celebration winds down, the townsfolk begin cleaning the square. They're already reminiscing about how unforgettable the months of demons were, thanks entirely to the prince's inventions and leadership. They wonder aloud what the artillery division will do now that the threat is gone. Vanner assures them they'll find out tomorrow. The next morning, horns blare, summoning all soldiers for an important announcement. Hunter Ironaxe stands before them and explains that because they protected Bordertown through the months of demons, every member of the civilian army is now officially part of Prince Roland's private army. They may choose to leave, but those who stay will become professional soldiers sworn to the prince and his territory. A knight asks if joining the private army means becoming actual knights. Ironaxe clarifies the private army is a trained military force with stricter discipline, continuous training and higher pay. Some soldiers remain doubtful, until he spells out the military ladder. Exceptional performance in battle will lead to promotions. Officers will earn more silver and even be granted land of their own. The troops instantly light up at the idea. But Ironaxe's tone hardens. Being in the private army requires strict discipline. Any violation of the code of conduct, fighting, disobedience, stealing, will result in severe punishment, from forced labor to execution. The soldiers tense at the warning. Ironaxe challenges anyone with doubts to walk away now. No one moves. Vanner stands tall, unwavering in his loyalty to the prince. Seeing the squad's resolve, Ironaxe bellows that from this moment on, they are Prince Roland's private army. Training begins immediately. And with that, Bordertown takes its first step toward becoming a true military power. Back in the castle, Lightning reports the latest updates about the newly formed private army. Because snow still blankets the outskirts of the city, she explains, the soldiers will be crawling rather than running through their 4-mile daily drills. As Lightning admires the new blueprints the prince has drawn, he sits deep in thought, wrestling with the enormous challenge ahead. Creating an entire military structure from scratch, regulations, ranks, training systems, rewards, punishments, is a monumental task. He once enjoyed playing military chess as a child, but those memories are far behind him. Now he must innovate and build something the world has never seen. As they examine the blueprints together, the word bayonet catches Lightning's eye, and she grows curious. Before they can discuss it further, a knock interrupts them. Both witches vanish instantly. The prince calls the visitor in. The old custodian appears, reporting that an aristocrat named Chris is demanding an audience. Chris had left during the months of demons and only now returned, furious because his mansion was demolished during the construction of the new walls. When Chris enters, he sternly demands answers. He claims his mansion cost 150 gold royals, a fortune, and demands compensation. The prince calmly asks if he means the westernmost house in Bordertown. Chris confirms it. Roland apologizes, explaining that the house was too close to the wall and blocked troop movement, but assures him he will be reimbursed. Chris immediately brightens and asks how much. The prince tells him 20 golden royals. Chris is outraged. After some grumbling, he reluctantly accepts and asks where to collect the payment. The prince tells him the compensation has already been issued to the actual owner. Chris slams his hand on the desk, insisting he is the real owner. The prince smoothly asks why. If that were true, he never once returned during the months of demons. Chris hesitates, then admits he stayed in Longsong Fortress because he didn't want to die in Bordertown. That is all the prince needs. He leans in and asks if Chris is openly admitting to deserting his ruler during wartime. The chief knight steps in, clapping a heavy hand on the noble's shoulder. He warns Chris that this can still be treated as a simple misunderstanding. If he walks away quietly, otherwise, he will be charged with treason and executed immediately. Chris begins sweating profusely. He quickly admits the house was not truly his. Roland waves it off casually and allows him to leave without further trouble. Before Chris flees back to Longsong, the prince sends a message with him. If any other nobles come back thinking they can dodge their responsibilities, they should reconsider. Outside the city, Chris punches a tree in frustration. He convinces himself that once the Duke of Longsong regains control of the territory, Roland will be forced to step down, and he will be there to gloat over the prince's downfall. But his anger evaporates when he sees a mysterious veiled woman approaching Bordertown. Her grace and beauty stun him. He wonders if she could be the prince's wife. As she strides through the streets, bustling and lively even though the months of demons just ended, she briefly lowers her veil, then covers herself again. She reaches the castle gate, hesitating. Was Nightingale telling the truth about this prince? Could Bordertown really be sanctuary for witches? After weighing her options, she decides she can handle at least 2 guards if things go wrong. The knights react instantly, shouting at her to step back. Commoners are not allowed near the castle, but the woman stands her ground. She pulls down her hood, revealing her face, and boldly states her identity. She is a witch. The soldiers stare at one another, shocked and unsure what to do. Lady Leaf swallows nervously and requests to meet Nightingale, Nana, or Anna. One guard reluctantly goes inside to report. Watching him walk away, Leaf's stomach twists. What if he's fetching reinforcements? What if Nightingale lied? What if Anna and Nana were never here at all? Lost in anxious thought, she suddenly feels two warm arms wrap around her, and another pair join from the side. Leaf looks up. It's Stets, Nightingale and Wendy. They cling to her with trembling relief, tears filling their eyes. Wendy whispers softly into her ear, "Welcome home." Leaf breaks down in sobs, overwhelmed by the reunion she had feared she would never live to see. Meanwhile, our hero is seen yawning as Wendy gently brings him a cup of tea. During their quiet tea break, he casually asks about Nightingale. Wendy brightens immediately and reveals that Nightingale is busy welcoming a newly arrived sister. The prince nearly chokes on his tea. Wendy happily continues, explaining that several witches from the association have made it safely to Border Town. Shocked and excited, the prince asks whether they were not searching for the Holy Mountain. Wendy lowers her gaze and explains that only 7 witches remain. The rest were killed by monsters during their journey. She apologizes for allowing the newcomers into the castle while he slept, hoping he will forgive her. To her surprise, the prince is thrilled. More witches, no matter their powers, only strengthen Border Town. Wendy then hints at Lady Leaf's concern that these new sisters aren't warriors. Under the influence of the Stone of Divine Judgment, their powers are weak in combat, but the prince doesn't mind. A witch who can generate electricity means no more dark nights. One who can sculpt or preserve materials means skipping entire production steps. His mind races with possibilities. Using their abilities, he could drag this ancient world into a new era of technology. Right then, Nightingale breezes into the room, snapping him out of his daydreams and reminding him everyone is waiting. Soon after, all the witches gather for dinner. The prince warmly welcomes them to Border Town, inviting them to enjoy the food and ask for anything they desire. Lightning enthusiastically chimes in, boasting about how generous their prince is, and how he's always happy to accept new witches. One witch scolds Lightning for being too casual, but the prince waves off the concern. Titles and rigid formalities mean nothing here. They should all eat before the food gets cold. The newcomers watch with fascination as Nana and Anna use chopsticks, strange little sticks they have never seen before. Still, confusion does not stop them from devouring the delicious meal. After dinner, the prince retreats to review the documents detailing each witch's abilities. As he scans through the profiles, he is disappointed to find none capable of sculpting materials or generating electricity, 2 skills that would have accelerated his modernization plans. But even without those, the talent before him is far from lacking. First is Lady Leaf, who can dramatically increase fruit yields and manipulate plants at will, perfect for agricultural expansion. Second is Scroll, gifted with an inhuman 24-hour memory who can recreate any book she has ever read, ideal for building a proper education system. Third is Hummingbird, the adorable witch capable of adjusting weight, making transportation and cargo lifting effortless. Fourth is Sazen, daughter of a merchant family from Grey Castle's capital. Using her magic brush, she can recreate any landscape in perfect detail, without paint or paper. She's essentially a living camera. Fifth is Echo from the southern continent, able to mimic any sound flawlessly, turning her into a master of sonic illusion. Sixth is Lily, who just turned 16 and can prevent food from rotting, opening the door to large-scale food preservation, though the prince isn't yet sure whether her ability can kill bacteria. But after Leaf, the most intriguing witch is the 7th, Moon. Quiet, withdrawn, often bullied by her former teacher Kara for being useless. Yet her ability after maturity is astonishing. She can magnetize metal, almost any metal. For our hero, magnetism means one thing: electricity, the oldest engineering trick in the book. Thank you, Faraday. With electricity comes light. With light comes industry. Another miracle is about to bloom in his territory. He decides not to sort the witches into battle and non-battle groups. Instead, he organizes them into 3 categories. First category: self-reinforcing abilities, passive powers unaffected by the Stone of Divine Judgment. Second category: summoning abilities, magic projected outside the body with an area of effect of 5 meters or less, powers easily weakened by the Stone of Divine Judgment. And thus, the foundation of Border Town's future, its military, its science, its agriculture, its education, is slowly taking shape under the prince's careful hands. The third category, power attaching, involves linking magic directly onto a target. The process is slow, drains a massive amount of magic, and can be interrupted by the Stone of Divine Judgment. But once the transformation is complete, the enhanced properties become intrinsic to the object. Even the Stone of Divine Judgment cannot strip them away. After sorting all this out, the prince finally calls it a night, knowing life is about to get much busier. While Roland prepares to sleep, the witches have gathered together in one room, huddled in a lively discussion. They're grilling Nightingale, asking whether they can avoid the agony of maturity by using their magic every day. Nightingale fires back confidently that Anna and Nana are living proof that this theory works. She explains that she has observed changes in their bodies through her fog. Their consistent magic use strengthened their magical vitality and softened the pain of maturity, known to witches as the antiphase. She doubles down, insisting that if they burn through their magic before awakening, they'll breeze through antiphase with almost no pain at all. Wendy joins in, saying that in the past, they never exhausted their magic because they were always running from the church and frightened to use their powers freely. That's why maturity was always agony. Lady Leaf finally understands why she felt no pain during her own antiphase. Her magic was drained during her battles with those devils. But as she realizes the truth behind their suffering, and the fact that the holy mountain they chased so desperately never existed, terror flashes across her face. Wendy immediately reassures her. The holy mountain doesn't have to be a mythical paradise. Border Town itself is more than a holy mountain because here, witches face no discrimination. Another witch wonders aloud whether witches elsewhere might have also found ways around antiphase, but she confesses she sent letters to the associations in Wolfheart and Dawn and never received replies. Nightingale then reveals that Roland is spreading rumors around the kingdom, claiming Border Town is the holy mountain to give other witches hope and encourage them to come here. One witch admits she still doesn't understand why Prince Roland cares about them. Another speculates he might want to use them like nobles use dancers. Nightingale bristles with anger, defending Roland fiercely. She insists that once they live here longer, they'll understand him. Wendy backs her up, explaining that from her experience, Roland has never treated them as tools. She warns them that tomorrow they'll sign work contracts with the prince, and they should be prepared. The next day, in the dining room, Roland lays out the rules. Everyone must read the contract carefully before signing. Afterward, they should begin practicing their abilities according to the outlined plans. Lady Moon timidly raises her hand, worried she'll mess up again, just like the time she nearly knocked Lily out with a floating iron pan. Roland gently reassures her that he will personally help with her training. He then tells Scroll, Leaf and Sei Zhen to meet him privately. In the Princeps office, Roland begins questioning them about the tragedy that struck the association, the monsters that slaughtered nearly all of them. Only 7 witches survived, including their teacher, who later died in the Badlands. He wants to know whether the creatures they saw were hybrids. Silence fills the room. Lady Leaf trembles slightly but eventually speaks. The monsters weren't demons, she says. They were devils, tall, terrifying beings who controlled demons and wielded magic just like witches. The prince turns to Sei Zhen, asking if she witnessed them too. Nervously, she confirms it. Roland slides paper toward her, and asks her to draw what she saw. If anyone is confused how Sei Zhen saw the devils while Leaf was the last to escape, Leaf had allowed some witches to retreat before she faced the devils alone. Sei Zhen summons her magic brush. Roland is mesmerized by her ability. She sketches rapidly, and the moment the final stroke lands, Roland and Nightingale both recoil. The creature on the page is horrifying. Sei Zhen slumps with exhaustion. Leaf points at the drawing and confirms it. The monsters she fought looked exactly like this. She describes one devil who hurled javelins at lightning speed, and another who conjured lightning itself. Their physical strength was monstrous, but they had a weakness. They couldn't maintain their special attacks for long. That sets the flaw she exploited. Roland is stunned. Lady Leaf fought these devils alone. Leaf continues. Under their masks, she discovered a vulnerable tube. When Kara's snakes bit through one of those tubes, the devil died instantly. Although Kara died soon after, Leaf used the same discovery to kill another one. She noticed red gas inside the tubes. Once that gas leaked out, the devils collapsed. The prince immediately recognizes the implication. A system of tubes filled with gas, essential for survival. It sounds like a respiratory system, he murmurs, staring at the sketches in disbelief. And the realization sends a cold, creeping dread through the room. Roland is unsure what to make of these creatures. If they were aliens, their behavior, weapons, and biology don't quite match any descriptions he knew from his former world. Then Lady Leaf reveals something even stranger. They encountered a floating city in the sky. No matter how far they walked toward it, the city never came closer. She believes it was likely a mirage. Roland asks if Sei Zhen can draw it, because if the city truly was an illusion, then the devil's real location could be somewhere in the Badlands, and the red mist floating above the city might be the very air the devils breathe. Sei Zhen begins sketching once again, while Roland considers the idea. The flatlands west of the mountain range are largely unexplored, so it would not be surprising for unknown species to exist there. He then turns to Scroll, asking about the ancient text Kara once read to justify her obsession with the Holy Mountain. Scroll explains that Kara never allowed anyone else to examine the book. She only managed to glimpse a few passages. The text was sloppy, disorganized, and filled with bizarre ramblings. Roland instructs her to recreate the ancient script from memory. Scroll hesitates, insisting it contains incoherent nonsense and could be dangerous. Reluctantly, she conjures a book for him but immediately shuts it, warning that he alone should read it. Others might fall into madness as Cora did. Roland accepts this and later, in his study, pores over the strange text while Nightingale casually snacks nearby. He asks if she isn't curious to see the book herself. She walks away, uninterested in anything that might scramble her mind. Roland argues that mere writing can't drive anyone insane, but she refuses to engage. He examines the text. Its archaic grammar and unusual symbols make it difficult to understand. There's no mention of a holy mountain, only repeated references to a bloody crimson moon and a massive stone door. He can decipher individual words, but the meaning resists interpretation. Then one line leaps out at him, widening his eyes. Humans stand no chance against the devils. The text continues, describing how the divine stone of judgment was unable to endure the devil's relentless attacks. With brute strength alone, the devils destroyed the holy city of Tequila. Survivors fled in all directions, across mountains, through rivers, escaping what the text calls the door to the underworld. The writer says she is dying, being eaten alive by the devil's power. No medicine can save her. Before death, she writes to her friend Natalia, asking a final favor. She explains that Alice's Judgment Army experiment, designed to create warriors capable of fighting devils, has succeeded, but she fears that even victory would bring ruin. She begs Natalia to shut down the Judgment Army, believing only Natalia holds that authority. Roland finishes reading in stunned silence. Confusion floods his mind. Perhaps Kara believed witches were the same as devils, and thought they were destined to overthrow the church. But her logic is flawed. Devils do not share the weaknesses of witches. The divine stones can suppress witches, but they do nothing to devils. At the very least, Roland now knows the monsters Leaf fought were a different species, not witches. Still puzzled, he wonders when the church fought devils, and what kind of place Tequila was. He curses the original Roland for being such a useless student. If only he had studied instead of wasting time, he wouldn't be so lost now. He asks Nightingale if she knows where Kara found the book. Nightingale explains that Kara already possessed it before joining the association. According to Wendy, their group began in a seaside town called Seabreeze. Kara, Wendy, and Scroll were the earliest members. They once explored ancient underground ruins in the eastern forest near that town. Only Kara went deeper inside and claimed to have found the book there. Afterward, the association grew. The church eventually discovered their existence and began hunting them. Kara fled toward the mountain range, searching for the Holy Mountain. That's the full history of their group. Nightingale then asks if Roland wants to inspect the ruins. He shakes his head. The eastern forest is too far. His focus must remain on strengthening his territory, not chasing ancient mysteries. However, he shares a new idea, forming a proper organization, not an obsessive cult chasing mythical mountains, but a witch union, a structured group devoted to supporting witches legally and peacefully. No crimes, no persecution, no fear, just cooperation, purpose, and freedom. Meanwhile, at Longsong Fortress, a grand noble gathering is underway. Ambassador Perov marvels at how the event rivals the extravagant banquets of the capital. The Elk family clearly worked hard to gather nobles of such high status at Longsong Fortress. In the corner, a blonde nobleman urges his sister to approach the ambassador. She reddens in embarrassment, unable to bring herself to do it. The blonde noble finally musters his courage and casually calls out to Ambassador Perov, addressing him as buddy. The ambassador bristles at such informal treatment, but the newcomer insists they're old friends, and tells him not to be so stiff. He teasingly asks whether Perov wasn't appointed by the Lord of Longsong Fortress and jokes about the supposedly profitable mines near Border Town, implying they must be squeezing money out of the locals. Perov dodges the question, but the loudmouth keeps rambling. He explains how he was on his way to the Holy City, but got trapped in a blizzard. That blizzard likely saved his life. Curious, Perov asks what he means. The blonde reveals shocking news. The new Holy City nearly fell, with demons breaching the inner sanctum. If the church had not deployed their strongest warriors, the entire clergy would have been wiped out. He adds that the armies of all four major kingdoms suffered devastating casualties. Soldiers barely survived the Frost Valley campaign, and within a single month, countless women became widows. Widows now vulnerable to exploitation for as little as 2 silver coins. If you recall the church set's elite soldiers appearing earlier, this ties directly to those clashes. The blonde insists this was all part of the church's plan. With the major kingdoms weakened and their generals dead, Hermes can dominate unchallenged. Then, leaning closer, he asks if the ambassador noticed a handkerchief in his invitation. Perov frowns, wondering if this is some kind of prank. The blonde assures him he's not teasing. After all, if he wanted to mock him, he'd have included socks. He explains the handkerchiefs were sewn by his younger sister, who just turned 16 today. Clearly, he's trying to set her up with the red-haired ambassador despite their age gap. Before Perov can respond, a sudden outburst erupts across the hall. A furious noble is hurling insults at Prince Roland, every vulgar name in the book. Perov steps forward to investigate. A man explains they are arguing about the ruler of Border Town, who has seized noble property. A curly-haired noble clarifies the situation. He lives in Bordertown but takes refuge in Longsong Fortress every winter. This year he claims Roland demolished the noble's houses to build a defensive wall without compensation. Even worse, Roland labeled any noble who fled to Longsong as a traitor, and anyone returning now risks execution. Perov quickly realizes what Roland is doing. He's severing all dependence on Longsong Fortress and turning Bordertown into a self-sufficient territory. The nobles continue complaining, begging Ambassador Mehdi to appeal to Duke Ryan for support. Mehdi steps in, telling everyone to calm down. Duke Ryan is already taking action. He's building an army, and the Elk family is on board. The nobles collectively sigh with relief. If the Duke himself is involved, they believe nothing will go wrong. Perov, however, is not comforted. Mehdi drags him aside, shrugging off his concerns. In his eyes, Roland is just a prince with a patch of dirt. Once faced with a real army, he'll surrender immediately. But Perov isn't convinced. Mehdi insists that once the Duke marches in with overwhelming force, the farmers and miners of Bordertown will scatter like ants. Still, Perov feels uneasy. Something tells him Roland won't lose so easily. Later, Perov returns to the Honeysuckle family estate. His father greets him and orders him to review their import-export logs and available manpower. They must prepare to support the Duke's spring military campaign. Perov is stunned. They're seriously preparing for war against Bordertown. His father explains that Duke Ryan has already called for recruits. All 5 major families must contribute knights and workers. Perov asks how many they plan to send. His father lists the numbers, over 100 men in total. Perov jumps to his feet, begging him not to join the battlefield. The old man, baffled, asks why. Hyberv blurts out that he's terrified something will happen to him. His father bursts into laughter, amused by his son's concern. To him, Longsong Fortress is an elephant, and Bordertown is an ant. There's nothing to fear. He reminds Perov that Prince Roland only has a handful of knights and perhaps 50 guards in total. But Perov stands firm. Everyone underestimated Roland's mud walls, predicting they would collapse after one rainstorm, yet they held strong. Everyone thought Bordertown would crumble during the months of demons. Instead, Roland not only survived, he earned the respect of soldiers and civilians alike. And that lingering fear inside Perov refuses to fade. Back in Longsong Fortress, the Honeysuckle Patriarch grows increasingly irritated by Perov's warnings. He snaps at his son to keep quiet and jabs a finger toward the portraits of their ancestors, battle-hardened warriors who never back down. As their descendant, he refuses to flee from any battlefield. Perov swallows the scolding silently, knowing his father still cannot grasp how unpredictable Prince Roland truly is. In Perov's mind, Honeysuckle is marching straight into political turmoil, and may end up swallowed whole by the prince he keeps underestimating. Back in Bordertown sits Castle. Roland reflects proudly that he has fulfilled a promise granting land to Nana's father Taigu Pine, making him a Viscount. The forested region south of the river is still undeveloped, but Roland promises it will be the first area expanded when Bordertown grows. Every business share on this land will belong to the Pine family. Taigu Pine agreed happily, content to use the wilderness for hunting until development begins. Roland also officially knights Brian, declaring that with each military achievement he will earn new land. With this, Roland has found a way to use the surrounding wilderness efficiently. The river will mark the boundary. The area between the river and mountains will become a military training ground, while land across the river will be reserved for future factories and agriculture. The western forest, rich in lumber, wild fungi, game and medicinal herbs, will also be incorporated into the territory's expansion. Just then, someone arrives. Sister Sazen. Roland greets her warmly and motions for her to sit. He asks about her progress at City Hall. He had asked her to draw passport-style portraits of every resident in Bordertown to create identification records. Each person was paid 10 bronze coins simply for sitting while she drew their likeness, and though confused by the purpose, Sa completed every portrait diligently. Today, however, Roland has a new task for her. When she asks what he needs, Roland eagerly slaps his hands on the table and announces he wants her to draw a few trinkets, just for fun. Although puzzled, San agrees. She asks whether she should invent them from imagination. Roland instructs her to draw a soldier holding a heavy crossbow. She activates her magic pen, and Roland adds more specifics, include armor, background details, pose, everything. Sa draws nervously while Roland watches with fascination. When she is done, Roland is impressed by the realistic outcome. Then he instructs her to draw a small circle near the top center of the card. She follows along as he continues to dictate exact markings. After one card is complete, he tells her to create an entire deck. Once she finishes, Roland reveals his plan. He will teach her how to play a card game. They end up spending the entire day playing. In the final round, Roland wins dramatically by slamming down his strongest card, an ace. Sax is stunned and demands a rematch, but Roland postpones it since it's already late. She leaves reluctantly though still excited. Morning in Bordertown. As dawn's golden light fills the castle halls, A soft melody drifts through the air. Say recognizes it immediately. Lady Echo is singing. She remarks that Echo must have learned the poem she taught her. We catch up with Anna as she pauses to enjoy the music. Scroll enters the room and informs her that Sai is calling everyone. Anna sighs, wanting to read a bit more while savoring the song. Scroll then reveals that Echo admires Anna's abilities more than any witch here. Surprised, Anna asks why. Scroll explains that Echo isn't originally from Greycastle. She was born on the southern continent, but was kidnapped by slave traders and brought to Clearwater Port. There, she was trained in seductive techniques to fetch a higher price at market. Although life is better now, her past is filled with sorrow, torn from her family and transported far from home. Anna feels a pang of sympathy. Scroll adds that Echo considers Anna's power a blessing beyond measure. After all, beautiful singing alone is hardly a reliable livelihood. Scroll gently pats Anna's shoulder, reassuring her that she has nothing to worry about anymore. Witches here are safe, valued, and no longer forced into desperate survival. Anna, being the first witch Prince Roland ever met, unknowingly became the symbol of hope for all the others. Then Scroll notices something amusing and slightly unsettling for Anna. She points out that Anna's hair has grown long. Anna blushes and admits she always cuts it herself. Scroll cheerfully declares that she will give Anna a proper haircut, proudly mentioning that she used to cut every sister's hair back in the association. After a while, Scroll returns with her tools, ties Anna's hair with a cloth, and begins trimming it with practiced ease. She explains that she once made a living as a barber before joining the association. Anna hesitates, then asks something that has clearly been weighing on her mind. She mentions that the books she read last night always tell stories where the prince marries a princess or a noble lady. She asks why it always has to be that way. Scroll replies calmly, "It's simply how the world works." But Anna immediately challenges the logic, asking what happens if a prince doesn't like princesses or noble ladies. Scroll explains that personal preference doesn't set matter. A prince, especially one expected to become king, must marry into nobility. A kingship's marriage is political, not romantic. And more importantly, royal bloodlines must remain pure. The realization hits Anna like a stone. She quietly processes the fact that witches cannot bear children. Even Scroll knows this well, and she tries not to let Anna feel discouraged. Once Scroll finishes cutting her hair, Anna looks cute and refreshed. Scroll promises that from now on she'll choose stories with less rigid endings. She heads toward the door, but tells Anna to visit her anytime if she reads something she doesn't understand. Before she can leave, Anna speaks again, softly but with conviction. She says Roland is not the kind of prince found in those stories. He always does what he believes is right, regardless of expectations. Scroll raises a brow, asking why Anna thinks that. Anna replies simply, if he were like any other prince, he never would have saved her. Later we see Roland holding a sheet of paper with the Pythagorean theorem written on it. He teaches Scroll basic algebra and tells her he'll write more equations for her to memorize. When he asks if she understands, Scroll nods, inhales deeply, and activates her power to imprint the knowledge into her memory. Roland knows what he's doing. As an engineer in his former world, he carries a vast reservoir of math and physics knowledge. But memory fades, and he fears losing crucial concepts, so he pours everything he can onto paper, relying on Scroll to preserve it for future generations. With her perfect recall, she can safeguard an entire scientific foundation. Still, he hasn't unraveled what magic really is. In this world, magic bends natural laws in ways he cannot compare to electricity or any known energy source. To truly understand magic, he must understand the universe itself. His mind wanders to Einstein's theories and wonders whether magic existed in his old world unnoticed, simply because there were no witches to reveal it. His daydream breaks when Scroll interrupts. Hours have passed, so Roland ends the study session. Before leaving, Scroll turns back and asks something serious. Why did he ever take in witches? Wasn't he afraid of the church? Roland nods, expecting this question, but then Scroll asks a second one that makes him almost choke on his tea. Would you ever marry a witch? He sputters, asking why she suddenly brought that up, but as he wipes his face, his thoughts drift. He imagines briefly what life would be like if he did marry a witch. Anna's smile flashes before him, and the images warm him. After a moment he answers honestly, yes, he would absolutely marry a witch. Outside, Nightingale walks the halls in her nightclothes, looking unusually cheerful. Wendy asks what she's smiling about. She rarely sees Nightingale so distracted and happy. We shift back to earlier. Nightingale had been quietly eavesdropping on the conversation and heard Roland's declaration. The moment he said he'd marry a witch, a spark of hope lit inside her. Back in the present, Wendy keeps pestering her. Guessing she must have won a game of cards, Nightingale deflects with a small smile. The next morning, training intensifies. Iron Axe drills the soldiers mercilessly, barking orders while they push their limits. The chief knight is impressed, These men used to be miners and hunters with sluggish attitudes. Now they move with the ferocity of true fighters. Still, he knows that only real battle will forge them into proper soldiers. Roland arrives and asks Knight Carter about their progress. Carter answers proudly, then asks about the woman beside him, wondering if she's a witch. Roland confirms it, and orders him to gather everyone. He has an announcement. The knight calls the troops to attention. Once assembled, Roland begins speaking, greeting them warmly. Then, out of nowhere, Iron Axe lunges forward like a man possessed. Knight Carter immediately leaps to defend Roland, but Iron Axe doesn't attack. Instead, he drops to his knees before the witch beside Roland, and bows. Clan leader, he whispers reverently. Everyone stands frozen. The scene cuts sharply to a burning battlefield from years past. A young man with a massive axe slaughters enemy after enemy, fire reflecting off his brutal swings. Nearby, the same witch, now revealed as the clan leader, screams in anguish as this savage man cuts down her loyal companion. The past and present collide, and the soldiers realize something profound. This witch is not just another newcomer. She is part of a history soaked in fire, blood, and vengeance. Iron Axe's memory continues. The arrogant invader stands over Lady Echo in the past, demanding to know whether she is the last surviving member of the Osha clan. He declares a sacred duel, insisting that her father and brother died by his hand, and that by the ancient rules, her fallen clan must now become slaves under his rule. When he reaches out and forcefully lays a hand on her, her loyal subordinate, Iron Axe, steps forward, shouting for him to stop. But before either can act, someone crashes a heavy blow into the back of the attacker's head, dropping him instantly. Even so, the brute recovers quickly and continues humiliating Lady Echo. Stepping over her as though claiming victory, he orders his men to haul her off to Clearwater Port, believing they've found a prize worth fortunes. Meanwhile, Iron Axe collapses from his wounds. As his consciousness fades, he watches helplessly while the intruders load their spoils and prepare to flee. Back to the present. Iron Axe finishes his story. After losing his clan leader, he refused to join any other tribe. His only mission became finding and rescuing Lady Echo. He searched countless slave markets across the far south and Clearwater Port, but found no trace of her. He falls to his knees, swearing before the three gods that he will follow Prince Roland for life. He admits he lost control when he saw Lady Echo and accepts full punishment. Roland steps forward and tells him to rise. With a measured tone, he hints that helping Iron Axe avenge his clan may not be impossible. Iron Axe's eyes widen with hope. Roland confirms it. Not now, but one day. Overwhelmed, Iron Axe thanks him fervently. Lady Echo, however, softly states that she is no longer a clan leader. The weight of her past lingers heavily on her. Roland reflects quietly. Everything Iron Axe described about the extreme south fascinates him, especially the black tar-like substance that seeps from the ground and burns for days. Suddenly his eyes widen. He recognizes it instantly. Oil, not a mere deposit, an oil fountain. His mind races: engines, fuel, machines, an industrial revolution waiting to ignite. Calming himself, he tells Iron Axe that once he becomes king, he will allocate resources to reclaim the southern territory for the Osha clan. Iron Axe nearly bursts with joy, swearing loyalty again. But Roland's tone hardens. Iron Axe still broke the First Army's rules. He is sentenced to 2 days of imprisonment. Iron Axe accepts the punishment without hesitation. Later, soldiers chat quietly during training. One asks about Captain Iron Axe's absence. Another corrects him: he's team leader now, per the prince's new ranking system. They discuss Iron Axe's situation, and hope the prince won't punish him too harshly. Just then, Roland arrives with Knight Carter and his entourage. Carter calls the troops to attention. The soldiers whisper among themselves about Iron Axe's punishment. Roland steps forward. He announces that training was paused for a reason, and will resume once he finishes. He introduces the woman beside him, Witch Echo, Iron Axe's long-lost clanmate. He explains that Iron Axe is imprisoned for insubordination and reinforces that following orders is the foundation of soldiering. The troops shout their acknowledgement. Echo then pulls back her hood. Roland explains her ability. She can mimic any sound, instruments, drum beats, commands, or full marching anthems. Her sound illusions will guide the formations from now on. The soldiers look confused, unsure what a marching song even is. Echo removes her robe dramatically, and Roland continues: on the battlefield, she will serve as their battle banner, the symbol to rally around. Protecting her will be their top priority. Then Echo begins to sing. Her voice sweeps through the air, clear, powerful, and uplifting. It isn't random singing, it's a battlefield anthem. The soldiers find themselves standing straighter, steadier, energized by her song. Late that night, soldiers on guard duty tense at the sudden thunk of an arrow. One man collapses instantly. More arrows rain down, piercing the defenders before they can shout a warning. Standing before a vast army of armored knights is none other than Prince Timothy, clad in shimmering gold from head to toe. His entourage praises him for striking in the dead of night, but he corrects them. His sister is certainly awake by now. He reveals the trap. He sent a decoy army down the main road, while he led elite knights through the dark eastern route to flank her position. Even if she wishes to retreat, she cannot. Night withdrawals are taboo. Her forces will crumble instantly. Timothy smirks. He knows his sister well. He believes she'll abandon her citizens and flee like a coward. He vows to capture her, whether dead or alive, even if she reaches Clearwater Port. No escape. A knight outlines the next move. They will strike Eagle City with overwhelming force. While Timothy hunts for Garcia, the plan is already set. He rallies his soldiers, urging them to wave the Grey Castle Kingdom's flag high. His troops charge forward, crashing into the frightened enemy soldiers and knocking them down before they can even think of fleeing. The knight beside him grins at the unfolding chaos, vowing to their king that they will scatter their enemies like dust. Timothy scans the field, searching for his other knight, Francis, who is supposed to create a diversion. Since Francis has not returned yet, Timothy assumes the greedy fool must be off plundering Garcia's treasures for himself. But suddenly, the knight beside him goes pale and points ahead. Timothy looks in the indicated direction and freezes. A massive silhouette of an army stretches across the horizon. Leading them is Garcia Wimbledon herself, proudly waving her flag as the Queen of Clearwater. With a calm, confident voice, she rallies her soldiers not to fear. Spears rise in unison. She smiles with unwavering certainty. Her brother, however, is furious. The sight of her commanding an army infuriates him. No matter how confident she appears, he is convinced this will be the last time she dares act brave. He fully intends to destroy both her and her forces. Meanwhile, at the entrance of Garcia's Eagle City, Francis finally appears. As he enters, terrified locals immediately slam their doors and shutter their windows. Suspicion grows within him. He knows Garcia is not foolish enough to leave her city walls unguarded. A strange smell hits him. He wrinkles his nose and announces that something reeks. He orders his soldiers to head to the town hall. It turns out something truly is rotting inside the sewage. Once at the hall, Francis and his men search the place. A soldier reports that the basement holds nothing of value. Enraged, the Duke begins violently kicking objects around. Only then does the truth hit him. This was her plan all along. If she had retreated in a hurry, she would not have had time to strip the castle bare. She was prepared to abandon the city long before they arrived. Right on cue, more bad news arrives. The north gate is on fire. Francis rushes outside,